social issues, education, religion, government, or national security. Brannon brings the issues of the day into clear focus through the lens of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon Howse.
And good evening. Welcome to the broadcast on this Tuesday evening, August 25th, 2026. We're going to be joined by JB Hixson in studio in just a little bit. First, we're going to have on a very special first-time guest, Alix Meyer. We were introduced to her by Nicole Pearson. We're going to talk about the situation with vaccines, all the vaccines required for kids to enter school in certain states. I have a lot of questions for her about where we're at with the MAHA movement. How is Bobby Kennedy Jr. Doing in her estimation? A lot to talk about with Alix Meyer. Alix Meyer, first-time guest tonight. Then in studio, as he was for 1 to 2 p.m. Central Day for radio and television, JB Hixson. And we're going to talk about a lot of things. Oh, maybe like we can talk about the Mecca agreement between Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan. We're going to talk about, is that setting up the Gog Magog coalition of nations, this is at least the beginning of it, to move against Israel? What kind of time frame are we in for a lot of these events to start unfolding according to the Bible? We have a lot to talk about with him. I don't know. We'll just start talking about it. I definitely want to talk about food shortages. And I think food shortages, as I said today on radio, are being created on purpose, as we began to warn about back in 2020. Remember back in 2020 when we talked to you about the Rockefeller plan, the Rockefeller Foundation plan called Reset the Table, which basically when I read it, I showed the PowerPoint, the slides on TV back in 2020. It was about nationalizing the food industry, basically. Why would you nationalize the food industry? It sounds like to me they're creating a food crisis on purpose. And I want to get into that tonight also with JB Hixson in studio. Okay? Now, before we get going here tonight with our first guest, brand new first guest, Alix Meyer, I want to ask you guys to add to your prayer list a lot of the folks that are in our audience. We have Melissa does a lot of the ministry work, working with donor relations, customer support. She spends a lot of time ministering to people on the phone, to be honest with you. People that are widows, widowers, and many of them are feeling very, very alone. Very, very common for Melissa to have people on the phone talking to her who become very emotional and start crying. And because they are really lonely, their spouse has died, there are a lot of decisions to be made, and they don't have that spouse to help them make it. A lot of them are women, and they're missing their husband who helped make a lot of these decisions. And they're looking at what's happening in the world, they're watching and listening to this broadcast, and they're trying to prepare the best they can, but they're really missing that husband who really helped with a lot of these preparations. Some of them, and this is so consistent and across the board now, sadly, becoming such a common theme. A lot of folks don't have much of a relationship with their children. Their children have moved away, or even if they live in the area, they don't really agree with them in their worldview. They're not interested in the biblical things they're interested in, Bible prophecy. They're not interested in even talking about, hey, what would happen if we did have the power grid go down? Or what would happen if we had a major terrorist attack? Or what would happen if we do have a dollar collapse or a reset of the currency? And I dealt with that in my Worldview Report commentary tonight. I was watching Daniela Caboni interviewing a girl, last name is Kinney, and they were talking about dollar reset. And what would it look like when they reset the currency? And I think we're headed for a great reset. I mean, they've pretty much been telling us that, right? A new system. So if you had $1 million in the bank It may end up only having the purchasing power of $100,000. Or if you have $100,000, it may only end up having the purchasing power of $10,000. Again, I don't give financial advice. I give financial opinion. But folks, I don't know how many times I can tell you that there are so many signs out there that something big is coming just when it comes to the dollar and your purchasing power. And yet we have seen, as I laid out in my commentary tonight, we've seen this happen in Venezuela. Logan, can you bring up that footage of those kids eating out of that dumpster, out of that garbage truck? This is in one of my documentaries, I think from 2018. And I had Logan produce it into one of our commercials about getting prepared. And it just strikes me every time I see it, because these are clearly middle-class kids, middle-class young people. You can tell by the clothes they're wearing, the backpacks that are on their backs. These are middle-class people. They never envisioned they'd be eating out of the back of a garbage truck. Now, look, those kids, look the way they're dressed. Look at those backpacks. Look at those shirts, those ball caps. These are not street people. One of them's got an earring in his ear. So he's got money. These are not people. Look, I can see one of them looks like he's got a gold chain on his neck sticking out from under his collar there. These are not people that were just poor, indigent street people. These are average people at the time in Venezuela, but under their massive inflation, this is what it ended up resulting, eating out of a garbage can and a garbage truck. Now, if you think that is, oh, well, that's just rare footage. That wasn't common. No, I have so much footage I can show you of different people, middle-class people, mom and dad with children, sifting through garbage bags for food. And that young man is talking about it. I have played that on the air. And they're talking about what has happened to their economy and their leaders and how much they hated their leader and what he's done to their country. This has happened in Venezuela. It's happened in Zimbabwe. It's happened in a lot of countries. And a lot of people think it can never happen here, but it can. And we're on the road to a banana republic with what we're doing with the money and our dollar and the debasement. And this great reset, folks, they're going to reset. Remember, President Trump bragged he was the king of debt. He liked playing with debt. And I don't think these people, whether it's Donald Trump or any of these people, from one administration to another, have any issue with doing what needs to be done to protect the system. Not you, the system. And I don't care what they tell you. The system is going to end up being what's protected. And when they do this reset, folks, many people who did not prepare are going to be wiped out. Now, there were people who actually in some of these countries ended up doing pretty well because they prepared. They prepared. And they had gold and they had silver and they were able to make it. And some people were able, because they had gold and silver, to go in and buy up stuff that dropped in price and they were to rush in and buy. So some people actually who know what's coming and prepare, they can actually do very well because they have prepared accordingly with real hard assets that hold their value. And when other things start dropping in value, they rush in and buy. But you may be saying, I'm not interested in making a bunch of money when it all collapses. I'm just interested in surviving and keeping what I've worked so hard for. Exactly. You don't have to be someone that says, I'm going to try to make a bunch of money on this reset. No, you're probably like the average American who's informed, which isn't the average American. You're just someone who's informed saying, all I want to do is make it on the other side and have a lifestyle that I have now and keep what I've worked for my whole life. Right. And that's why you better be looking at what the people that made it in Venezuela, Mexico, Zimbabwe, you better be looking at what they did and how they made it. And it wasn't by being heavily leveraged in currency, paper money that's backed by the full faith and credit of the government. As I said in my commentary tonight, don't laugh when I tell you what backs our currency. The full faith and credit of the United States. That sends most people laughing that really know the truth. Because that's like saying you trust, I hate to say it, but you would trust your very attractive wife to go out to dinner with Bill Clinton. I'm not sure you would do that, would you? You're going to trust the full faith and credit of the government and holding their paper backed by nothing? Now, again, if you're just wanting to not be somebody that eats out of the back of a garbage truck or has to go rummaging through trash bags or standing in line for a government handout, then I would be thinking, and I'd be thinking seriously about doing something about it. Because again, I don't know how many more commentaries and shows I can do warning about this convergence of things coming together. Then you not only add the dollar collapse, but as I'll get into with JB Hixson tonight, you add in over in Great Britain and now in America, the farmers talking about how they can't afford to plant a crop. And the farmland being bought up that's just sitting there idle. It looks like they're planning a food crisis on purpose because that is how you control people, food. When there is this reset, life is going to be tough enough. Life is going to be tough enough without worrying about your daily bread, your daily substance. And that's why, again, my family, we have at least 2 years supply of freeze-dried food and then a year set aside for bartering with as a medium of exchange. Because let me tell you something, when this reset happens, as has happened in other countries, your freeze-dried food will be a massive medium of exchange. And if you don't want to use it as a medium of exchange and buy extra, fine. But I would think you'd at least want to have enough to get you through several weeks or several months, or maybe even more than that, maybe a few years worth of real financial reset. And so if I were you, I'd be going to worldviewstore.com. Again, I don't give financial advice, I give financial opinion. My opinion is you need to prepare, and that's all I'm telling you. And I'm not saying anything that I haven't done. Worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. Let me tell you something else. You may say, I got my house paid for. You got your house paid off. You're debt-free. Good. That's very good. But how are you going to make the payment for the property tax? If you're sitting in dollars and those dollars have been debased, or you have had a bail in, they've reset the dollar and they've taken a lot of your money, how are you then going to come up with the money to pay your property tax? You need to be thinking about, I think, again, my opinion, being in gold and silver so that you can use the gold and silver to pay your property tax. So you can hold on to the house that you've paid off. And many states like Tennessee and others, they've passed legislation so you can actually pay your property tax, pay your debt to the state in precious metals. Many states are doing that now. They obviously must understand what's coming. So again, be thinking through these processes. And again, that's why you probably should go ahead and get the free packet of information from worldviewgold.com, worldviewgold.com, and start doing your homework on that and making decisions fast related to your 401k and your IRA and other things that I think personally are at great risk. Worldviewgold.com or 1-877-864-1072. But in the process of all this, I will ask you tonight, again, please be praying for the people in our audience, many of them who are feeling very alone. Their spouse has passed away. Many of them, their kids don't maybe agree with them or live near them, and they're feeling very alone. Pray for those people in our audience, will you? Because I know it's far more of you than we hear from. You know, when you hear from someone or you get a few letters, 2 or 3 letters or 2 or 3 voicemails or 2 or 3 emails, and they're saying the same thing, you start realizing, well, if this is just a small representation of my audience, that means there's a lot more than these 3 or 4 people that are going through this. And I cannot tell you how many conversations my wife has had over the last few years with people that really just don't have a lot of support. They feel very, very lonely. So pray for them tonight. You don't need to know their names. I don't know some of their names. And some of them haven't even called into the program. They haven't even called to talk to my wife. So we don't even know their names. Some of them we do, some of them we don't. But pray for those folks tonight because they're in our audience and we're hearing about it on a regular basis. We're also going to be doing something new soon. We're going to be opening up a spot on our website, part of our church, Worldview Foundation Church. We're going to be opening up a spot for people to give prayer requests to each other and try to create a little bit of community where you guys can minister to each other by logging in and being a part of that community through our church. So we'll be working on that, announcing that over the next few weeks as our IT guy gets caught up on everything. Okay? Now, before we go to our first guest tonight, and then JB Hixson, remind you again, we are a listener-supported network, worldviewtube.com/sponsors. I do Numi. This is glutathione to detox your cells. You need to detox your cells. This is all natural, occurring in your body naturally. Starts to decrease around age 20. You can't live without glutathione. 165,000 studies on glutathione. And some studies show it may remove mercury and lead from your brain, helping prevent Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. I do Bella Grace every day. 3 powerful ingredients in Bella Grace. Look at the hair growth, folks. And to be honest with you, I think it's a combination of the Bella Grace, the Numi, detoxing my cells, and the Gatatana. My wife and I were talking about that the other day. I said, I think it's the combination of all of them. You end up with better health, better gut health, better nutrition, and then you start seeing it. My fingernails, it's crazy. I got to cut my fingernails like every 10 days, 2 weeks, how fast they grow. Same thing with the hair. My wife went to the hairdresser the other day, and she said, your hair is so thick. It is so thick. What are you doing? And she told her. So again, we get great results at many, many levels with the products we're using, okay? And I'm also doing, of course, now 7 or 8 of these. I think I'm trying to getting up to 10 a day, but I'm doing the protein, melissaprotein.com. This is plant-based, burns fat, maintain your muscle mass. I'm walking 2.5 miles in the morning on my treadmill, 2.5 miles at night after I get off the air on my treadmill. So I'm doing 5 miles a day now. And this is helping me maintain my muscle mass. And I do this, the protein, the Bella Grace, the Numi, the Gatatana. And now I'm on vitamin D because my vitamin D levels have been too low. So I'm on vitamin D. We'll be telling you more about that with Dr. Mishima. And I also do a magnesium glycinate. Let me say it correctly. Magnesium glycinate that we'll be telling you about with Dr. Mishima Williams as well, which really helps me sleep well at night. So anyway, I'm feeling good, to quote James Brown. And these products have really, really helped me. I think they'll really, really help you. Again, we're seeing the power go off around the country, right here in the Mid-South this weekend. Indiana. So have a solar generator. I have one, the Delta Echo 400, your bulletproof backpacks, and so much more at worldviewtalk.com. Worldviewtalk.com. Make sure you have your antibiotics on hand. If there's a problem, at least have your antibiotics. We don't like to use a lot of antibiotics. We don't want our body to become immune to them so that when we really need them, we've used them too much. But when you have to have them, you have to have them. WorldviewHealthcare.com. These are all great sponsors at worldviewtube.com/sponsors. Worldviewtube.com/sponsors. All right, let's get going. Joining me now is a first-time guest. Alix Meyer joins us. She's friends with Nicole Pearson. We met her through Nicole, so thank you, Nicole. Alix, thanks for being with us tonight.
My pleasure, Brandon. I love being on your show. It's a fantastic, long-running show.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. Here you are. Here's your website. Free Now Foundation, freenowfoundation.org. Wow, I notice you got a big event coming up September 12th with Del Bigtree in Silicon Valley. Good for you. He's been a guest here many times. Now, you have been working with the Maha movement for quite some time, correct? Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I started my journey into vaccine skepticism in the 1990s. I was running a worldwide group for Apple Computer. I was about 29 years old, and I got 6 vaccines to go on a vacation to Bali. And during that trip, my legs turned into noodles, and it was probably the onset of Guillain-Barré syndrome. Luckily, that cleared up. I did collapse when I was on that trip. I started weeping, which was unusual for me. And I came back, and I thought I had 3 or 4 months of jet lag because I was sleeping 16 hours a day. I had 24/7 flu, 24/7 migraine, 24/7 nausea, and a lot of other new onset problems. And I ultimately realized I'd been vaccine disabled and then ultimately brain damaged.
Wow. How did you recover from that, Alix?
It's been a long slog of trying so many different things. You start out in the traditional medical system. You know, I live near Stanford, so I started out there, and they didn't have answers and they didn't have solutions. So I started going more and more into natural medicine. And now I'd say these days I'm doing things that would probably be considered more weird, but they work.
You care to tell us?
Do you want to hear the weirdest thing I've done recently?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
The weirdest thing, and I don't recommend this to anyone. I need to make sure that nobody thinks I'm recommending this, but the weirdest thing I've done recently is I had frog venom pushed into my skin with a lighted stick to make me throw up for a half hour and clear out toxins from my central nervous system. And it actually did help.
Wow. Okay, I don't think I'm going to go that far. I haven't thrown up in years, knock on glass. I would say wood, but this is all glass under here. But I haven't done that in years. That's one of the worst things that can happen is throwing up. But, you know, whatever you got to do to get these toxins, of course, out of your system. Of course, I don't know how you feel about this. It's also a plug at the same time. I do Gatatana. I swish with Numi, which is loaded with glutathione, to detox your cells. I don't know if you know about glutathione. I'm sure you do, right?
Yeah, of course. I know a lot about glutathione. It's your body's major antioxidant that's made in the liver, and it can be depleted very quickly by one thing in particular, which is Tylenol, which is why Tylenol is particularly dangerous to take when you give your children vaccinations, because you need your child to detoxify from the chemicals that are injected into the body. And that Tylenol actually reduces glutathione and prevents your liver from working as well as it could to get rid of those toxins. So it's a risk factor for the onset of chronic illness.
Wow, look at you. You're like a walking encyclopedia. Well, we love glutathione because of the, like 165,000 studies for it to detox. And some studies, of course, show it may remove mercury and lead from your brain, helping prevent Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. So, you know, all our regular listeners and viewers know how big we are on some of these things that my wife and I take. And one of them is that glutathione. You know, I have friends that go get glutathione IVs and NAD and all of these things. I think, you know, again, the reason I'm bringing this up is I think there's a segment of the American population that has figured out that I really don't trust a lot of these doctors. I'm going to go to a person that is a naturalist or a functional medicine doctor, and they're going these more traditional routes, which, you know, when you find out about something like glutathione, I knew nothing about it. And I'm like, wait a minute, glutathione is in your system. It starts decreasing at age 20. You have to have this to live. Wow. Why did I never hear about glutathione prior to the last few years? You know, what other things have I not been told that I should know about? Like glutathione, right? That's so basic now, right?
Brandon, the list is so long, and glutathione is so important, as you said, because we live in a toxic soup and our body needs to be optimal at detoxification. But we've been disconnected from the sun. We're told to wear sunblock. I mean, these very basic things that humanity needed. We've been disconnected from the earth as soon as we started wearing rubber-soled shoes. We don't get electrons from the earth anymore. There's so much natural stuff that we've just been taken away from because we think, you know, high tech is better and modern medicine is better. It's not always better. Start with the basics.
Yeah. Well, my wife's always like, you need to get some of that morning sun. You need 10, 15 minutes of that morning sun. And she does. And she's a beautiful blonde that gets really tan. And so I love it when she sits in the sun and has that beautiful tan with her blonde hair and blue eyes. But I don't have the time as much to sit in the sun. But I try because that's what she wants me to do. And I need the vitamin D. My blood test came back. My triglycerides are too high. So I'm now off. I was off sugar pretty much anyway, but I'm now off all carbohydrates. I was consuming too many of those. My vitamin D is down. So my wife's got me back on vitamin D to boost it because I'm not sitting in the sun quite enough. So, you know, a simple blood test all of a sudden starts showing me stuff. And then I started walking 2.5 miles now in the morning. I was at 2. Now I'm at 2.5 miles in the morning on a treadmill, 2.5 miles at night, so 5 miles a day. And you know what? I've said to my wife, not only do I have more energy, but I feel more joyful. I feel more happy. I feel more outgoing, and I just feel more energetic about life. She said, that's because your body is releasing those, what are they called? Endorphins?
Endorphins.
Yeah. So she said, why do you think people get addicted to working out? You feel good.
That's right. That's right. Good for you for doing all that. You're becoming a superhuman now.
Well, my wife is saying, I've lost 4 or 5 pounds. I'm headed toward doing more. We'll see how far that goes. But, that all came with just a little blood work, right? Just a little blood work tipped me off, thanks to our Dr. Bashima, who comes on here. She's a MD and a functional medicine doctor. She hasn't written a script in years. She said, I don't write prescriptions. I go to what is the issue, and I get to the core of what is the problem, and we change their diet, and we get them to exercising, and we get them the good, clean vitamins they need, the good, clean supplements that they need, and we can fix a lot of these problems naturally.
Absolutely. I think nature first, drugs last. That's how I live my life. And sometimes I do need pharmaceuticals because of what happened to me. I'm not fully recovered after 30 years of this, but I really go to nature first 99.9% of the time.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about our kids, because parents, you and I were just talking earlier about vaccines. There's a lot of vaccine hesitancy now. And that's not a bad thing, because you should be hesitant a lot of these vaccines, but that what a boomerang, right? I was interviewing, Logan, can you ask our software, what was the first year I interviewed Del Bigtree? I bet you it's been 10 years since I interviewed Del Bigtree, the first time. I mean, I've interviewed him a lot, but I bet the first time I interviewed him, well, it had to be at least 10 years ago, because it was right when that movie Vaxxed was out.
2015. That would have been 2015 then. Yeah,
that's 11 years ago. So, we were considered kooks for interviewing him and talking like that. And I think a lot of our own audience probably thought, what is he, why is he going this direction, right? And now look how mainstream has become, that even parents are like, I'm not even so sure about the vitamin K shot. Apparently there's a 77% spike in parents not even wanting their kids to get the vitamin K shot. Now, my wife and I didn't know a lot when our first child was born in 1996, but we knew enough to say to the doctor, we're very concerned about these vaccines. We got bullied, okay? We got bullied. He got them, and he got vaccine injured. Then we said on the next one, we're going to stretch them way out, and we started spacing them way out. The third child came along, and we said, not only are we going to space them out, we're not even going to do a lot of these, right? And if I were a parent today, knowing now what I know, and knowing I don't trust these doctors by and large anymore, most of them, unless they're like a Dr. Bashima, naturalist and a functional medicine doctor who's on the same page with us. I would be like these parents too. I don't know what any of this garbage is. And so now they're even getting rid of the vitamin K shot. What a boomerang, Alix, from 10 years ago to today, whereas we would have been thought as being kind of freaks and UFO, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster people, to now the average mom is on our side.
It's true. There's been such a boomerang, as you said. It started with COVID lockdowns, and then in 2021 with the unlawful COVID shot mandates. It started in the summer of 2021, which the Supreme Court then struck down in January of 2022. That was the period, that roughly 6-month period when we had the workplace mandates, the school mandates, the college mandates. That's when people started to distrust public health authorities. That's when people started to distrust even their doctor. And finally, they started to distrust the vaccination program, because I don't know anybody who got a COVID shot and doesn't really regret it at this point. Most people are regretting having gotten it. And on the other hand, I don't know anybody who didn't get a COVID shot who regrets that decision. So this thing is swinging the completely other direction, and public health has a big problem right now. They've got to increase people's confidence in public health and in vaccines if they want vaccine uptake to go up. Now, I'm not a vaccine abolitionist. I am for 100% choice in vaccination, and what I would call that is a soft mandate. And a soft mandate would mean that people like me or you could just quietly opt out. You don't have to go through a whole rigmarole of getting a medical exemption or getting a religious exemption. You shouldn't have to go through all that. This should be your choice, and you should be fully informed before you make that choice. And that's what parents are doing today. It's very rational.
So which vaccines are required for the children today? Is that a
Well,
state
it
by state?
depends.
Is that state by state, by the way?
It's state by state. It depends on who you ask. So in California, where I live, to go to school, children need more than 30 doses of 10 vaccines to go to school here. So that's hepatitis B vaccine, that's measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, what else? Polio, chickenpox, and one more. I'm not remembering it at the moment. I won't bore your listeners while I try to remember. But yeah, it's 10 vaccines to go to school in California.
And what age is that at? 5? 4?
That's from age 5 to 18. So actually, you asked a really interesting question. If you're 18 years old and still in high school in California, it's not required for you to get a vaccination and you don't need a medical exemption.
If you're 18.
Yeah, and
Why?
teachers don't need a medical exemption, and any child in special ed doesn't need a medical exemption. All of those people just have a recommendation, and they can just go to school with what's called a soft mandate and just not do the vaccines if they don't want to. However, most of the students, actually 87% of the students who go to school in California, are subjected to a de facto vaccine mandate for those 10 vaccines and more than 30 doses. And we have a medical exemption in California. We don't have a religious exemption, but that medical exemption, Brandon, that is designed to fail. And there's very few people who actually get a medical exemption here. If you can even find a doctor to write you one, which most of them refuse to do because they have to write it under penalty of perjury, then that doctor has to put it into a database we like to call the anti-vaxxer database. It's called California Immunization Registry-ME. And then guess what happens? The public health department in California looks at that medical exemption and decides whether or not they want to accept it. And they deny almost everyone that has hit their desk. And then they put it in the database that the medical exemption has been overturned. And then that information goes to the school, and the schools in California act as the enforcement arm, the police, to not let students in school if they're even missing one of those 30 doses.
So
And
by
let me
the
tell
time
you-
they're 5, so a 5-year-old has to have 30 doses?
No, but most of those are required by kindergarten. It's crazy. There's vaccines they have to continue getting when they're in 7th grade.
So they have to keep just going up, up, up all the way through school?
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
that wasn't that way when I was growing. I graduated from high school in 1988. I don't remember ever being told to go to school, I have to go get all these shots. I don't remember any of that.
No, we weren't. It was a soft mandate. So most people just did it because the trust in public health authorities and vaccines was high back then. But you could opt out if you wanted to as parents. You could just decide, hey, I have a kid who got vaccine injured. I don't want to keep vaccinating this kid, and I don't want to keep vaccinating the younger siblings. And that's more and more what people are waking up to today because of so many vaccines. Listen, the California schedule is just a subset of the bigger schedule that blue states follow. This is really bizarre right now because at the federal level, Trump just put out an executive order about 2 weeks ago, and he said that the vaccine schedule is now about, I think it's about 11 vaccines, but about half the doses that they're giving right now. However, California pinned its schedule to the January 2025 schedule, which is more than 90 doses of 17 vaccines. So in California, one of those vaccines that's still on the schedule, as I said, is hepatitis B vaccine. Now, if you go to the hospital to have a baby, hepatitis B vaccine is one of the vaccines they want to give your child on the first day of life. It's a very injurious vaccine. It's got a very high level of aluminum in it. Depending on which brand, it's 250 or 500 micrograms of aluminum, which is far more than a baby that size can process in one day. Now, in California, that's going to be quote unquote required, and the hospital could threaten Child Protective Services on you if you refuse to get it. However, the federal guidance now, according to the Trump executive order, is that hepatitis B vaccine goes in a category called doctor-patient decision-making, clinical shared decision-making. And they're not going to recognize that in California or any other blue states, believe it or not. Also, hepatitis B vaccine got into a second category at the federal level, again, not recognized by California and other blue states, but that category is also called high risk. And so the only situation where a baby would be in a high risk situation for hepatitis B is if the mother who just gave birth to that baby tested positive for hepatitis B virus. And that only happens in less than 0.5% of cases. So more than 99% of babies born are not in a high risk situation. They should never be pressured like you were to get the hepatitis B vaccine on the first day of life, or even at all while they're in the hospital.
Let's go back to the aluminum. The shot that babies are required to get in California, which shot is it and how much aluminum is in there?
There's a hepatitis B vaccine is usually given on the first day of life after a baby's born in the hospital, and it has 250 to 500 micrograms of aluminum, depending on which brand is given to the baby. And aluminum is the ingredient that we use in animal studies to induce allergies and asthma. For example, if you want a mouse to be allergic to egg protein, then you feed them egg protein, you give them an aluminum injection, then anytime they eat the egg protein, they're going to have an allergy to it. That's also how we create asthma in lab animals. We have them breathe in a protein, and then we give them an aluminum injection, and then they develop asthma when they're exposed to that allergen protein. Think about human vaccines. If you're vaccinated with aluminum-containing vaccines in the spring or the fall, maybe the Timothy grass is blooming and the oak trees are blooming, then you'll develop seasonal allergies perhaps to those now allergens that were previously safe for you. So you see how this plays out. I like to call the vaccine schedule the allergy recipe, because it's really a recipe for creating food allergies and inhalant allergies and asthma. And it shows up in all the research. I mean, you have anywhere from a 4 to 30 times risk of getting allergies if your child is fully vaccinated versus an unvaccinated child. It's unbelievable. And aluminum, we think, is the leading ingredient that's causing all these problems because we use it in studies to induce these conditions. Oh, there's another one. Let me tell you about how you induce a multiple sclerosis type model in a mouse. You inject them first with a protein that mimics the myelin sheath, and then you inject them with aluminum, and they develop a type of MS called, it's like an autoimmune encephalopathy in the mice. I mean, we know how to do it in lab animals, but then they deny that they cause these things in humans. And I'm talking about allergies, asthma, autoimmunity, neurological disorders, and learning disabilities. All of them. You have at least a 4x risk for all of those things if your child is fully vaccinated compared to an unvaccinated child.
And what is the connection? Now, we didn't let our kids, any of our kids, even the first one, we didn't let get the hepatitis B because we at least knew enough to know that's for people whose mothers are intravenous drug users or your child's going to be sexually active. And they were like, well, my wife's not an intravenous drug user. She's not a drug user, period. And we're not worried about that. And then we found out the shot only was good for like 7 years, I think. I think it was a 7-year limit on that. So we're like, so you're telling me our kid's going to be sexually active and using dirty needles between birth and 7 years of age? This is the dumbest thing in the world.
It really is. Yeah. I can't remember exactly what percent of children who are vaccinated at birth with hepatitis B vaccine have waning immunity by the time they would be sexually active, but it's significant. And that's actually a problem with most vaccines, Brandon. They don't confer lifetime immunity. That was the whole concept of vaccines, one shot and done, one and done, and you have lifetime immunity. And it doesn't work like that with vaccines. They all have waning immunity. And the one I want to point out that has the biggest problem with waning immunity is the measles vaccine. There's a study by a guy named Gregory Poland from the Mayo Clinic. He became obsessed with this problem of the measles vaccine immunity, quote unquote, wearing off. And so he studied it very deeply. And he published a study showing that 40% of people who had a measles vaccine 20 to 40 years prior no longer have any detectable measles antibodies. So, and that's a proxy for saying if somebody's immune or not. I mean, there are other immune factors like T cells and B cells, of course, but in vaccine studies, all they look at are these antibodies. And so his study of the waning immunity of the measles vaccine just looks at the antibodies, and they're not there in 40% of people who got the vaccine, a couple decades ago. So who's the bigger problem for measles? Is it an unvaccinated person, or is it the potentially 40% of adults who don't have any immunity to measles anymore? Please. I mean, we know from a 2019 study called the Control Group by an attorney named Joy Garner that the number of people who are fully unvaccinated is infinitesimally small. It's actually only 0.25% of the population is fully unvaccinated. So I'm so sick of people blaming the unvaccinated for outbreaks when waning immunity in adults is the big problem. And if I can, I'll take a little breath and keep going on that. Most of the adults who think other people should be vaccinated to get to this concept called herd immunity, which doesn't actually exist with vaccines because of the waning immunity problem and other issues, they wouldn't themselves want to contribute to herd immunity. They want children to get all these vaccines, the 90 doses of 17 vaccines. But how many adults, Brandon, do you know who would go and get their antibodies tested for all 17 of those infections and then get boosters to the point where they show immunity in their blood? I'd say probably zero. But they want our kids to do that. They want our kids to take all the risk and blame anti-vaxxers for lack of herd immunity when the problem is vaccines that cannot achieve herd immunity.
And what role do you think this all plays in sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS?
Oh, a huge role. We know from the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System that 80% of SIDS deaths in young children occur within 2 to 3 days of a vaccination. So it's black and white. It's right there. And everybody will come back and say, oh, well, the VAERS database, that's not causal. Well, I'm sorry, but when you have a temporal relationship like this, where you see a huge cluster within a short period from vaccination, what else could it be?
Yeah, what else could it be? I want to show you something. We've been doing this a long time. I just searched this because I didn't really realize what it was we were on the cusp of talking about and exposing. But this battle goes on, so many decades ago. And it just came to my mind when you're thinking about child protection services being brought in, what gets done to families, and all these cases. I got my start in talk radio through a Californian by the name of Michael Reagan. You may have heard of his father, Ronald Reagan. And Michael and I became friends in February of 1993 when I first appeared on his broadcast as a guest on my third book that came out that year, and second book that came out that year. And we became fast friends, and I became a regular guest. I became his education reporter and then a frequent guest host, which is how the network I'm on today, been working with for 31 years, heard me and picked me up. But Michael and I, back in 1996, and I'll look up the other date, but we covered a couple cases that I think you'll find interesting, which I think shows us what it was we were fighting then, but didn't fully realize where this was going. And I just asked Yahoo about it. Brandon House and Michael Reagan on Rachel Stout case, 1996. And I guess it's linking a New York Times article that's behind a paywall. I can't see it. But it said, Brandon House and Michael Reagan discussed the Rachel Stout case in 1996. We didn't just discuss it. We broke the story. Highlighting the legal and ethical dilemmas surrounding medical decisions for minors. The case involved a family's battle against court orders regarding necessary surgery for their daughter, Rachel, who's critically ill. Well, let me tell you what the real story is. She basically had ulcerative colitis or colitis. She had some kind of irritable bowel type situation. She goes to, I think she was down in Texas, and you can go back to both of us, guys. I think she was down in Texas, and they were shoving all of this steroids and all this stuff on her, and she was bleeding. I think she was bleeding, in the stools and whatnot. And that's very common with this kind of ulcerative colitis or colitis and these kind of things. And at one point, and this is in our archives, and Michael wrote about it in one of his books, we covered it, and he wrote about it. The father goes in there with a medical doctor, and a friend of theirs, they scooped her up with her IV and everything, and took her and put her in a van, got her to the airport and flew to, I think it was to Canada, got her with a doctor in Canada who started treating her more naturally. Her appetite returned, her condition greatly improved. Well, the CPS, I guess, took this as a insult and got a court order, and they ended up being grabbed at the hospital and escorted by in ambulance back to a plane. And when she touched down in the United States, she became a ward of the state. And if I remember all the story correctly, they ended up removing part of her colon, which at the time we were reporting for a young girl this age having this done, it could impact her longevity at life. Now, I'm recalling all this off memory, but we interviewed the father. Michael and I interviewed the father. I brought the story to Michael. We broke it, and it got picked up by other outlets. That was just one of several cases that Michael and I brought in the 90s, showing this medical establishment overpowering the parents. And this girl was up there getting better with a doctor who was choosing to treat her in a way that was not going to require surgery, and she was improving because they were trying to force this surgery on them in the States. But little did we know, Alix, what we were exposing and fighting then was just one of many stories that leads us to where we are today, where our kids are now basically guinea pigs on a system that that really is, and I believe, population control, whether deliberately or on purpose. And I don't, but when you hear what some of them are talking about population connected to vaccines, when you know that the Kissinger report in the 70s, and they were tying abortion on demand and all these things, vaccines and sterility, and we're going to use food to control these third world countries. You start thinking, wait a minute, this has been an agenda to overpower parents and to go against life and parenthood and motherhood, and to create this medical industrial complex that criminalizes parents for making common sense decisions and trying to heal their own children without a lot of these invasive procedures or what could be life shortening procedures. That I didn't realize when we were fighting that back in the 90s, what we were really fighting. We thought these were isolated cases. I think these were actually symptoms of a bigger complex.
I totally agree with you. It's become so obvious now. I mean, again, to go back to COVID and lockdowns, it could not have been more obvious what they're trying to do to us. And they're doing it in a number of different ways. So not everybody recognizes what's going on. The bottom line is they're trying to medicalize our children in every way possible as a way for the state to come in between the parent and the child. And it's a huge problem. I mean, we had a case at Stanford Hospital where a very, loving and caring set of parents brought their 4-year-old daughter in because she was sick. And they found that, there was something wrong with her kidneys, and they ended up dosing her with these kidney drugs that are only supposed to be given to adults in these massive doses that you wouldn't even give to an adult. And our board member and attorney, Dr. Richard Fox, he came in and he finally got Child Protective Services off of this couple's back, and they were following them to their home. It was a really, really scary situation. Parents shouldn't have to put up with that. Parents should always call the shots, and that's what my organization is all about. Free Now Foundation files lawsuits to protect these parental rights because parents should always call the shots. And I mean that literally in regards to vaccines, but I also mean it for every other type of medical treatment or psychological intervention or anything. They're your children. You're in charge.
Yep. Well, and we also dealt with another case, Michael Reagan and I did, we produced a documentary on it, which happened to be in 1996 as well. And that was of 59 11-year-old girls given forced genital exams at school without their parents' permission or knowledge. And we ended up bringing national attention to it, broke the story. Because I'd been doing the Reagan show so much, parents were reaching out to me, which is how the Rachel Stout story came to us. We ended up interviewing the father. This story of the little girls in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, the parents called us. I verified the story, found it to be absolutely 100% true, and brought it to Michael Reagan, and we covered it on the air, interviewed the father and the mother. The mother, a few years later, sadly passed away. But this little girl was with 58 of her classmates at 11 years of age, were forced to stand in line, strip down to their underwear, stand in line and wait their turn to spread eagle on an exam table at school. One girl was trying to climb out the window. They were told if you did not submit, they called in school security to hold you down. They were told that when the parents found out, and this is in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, I think, again, our video on this, our documentary came out in 96, so this may have happened in 95. I'd have to go back and check the actual date. But some of the fathers up there absolutely had a fit, had a fit, as you could well imagine. Good. And some of these dads, they had to, basically be told, we understand, but you need to really control yourself here because you got to be careful what you're talking about here publicly, because some of them were so livid what they were saying they were about to do when they found out what happened. And they were told that the little girls, that there was no penetration. Well, other girls were like, no, there was spotting afterwards. And finally it came out there had been. And so we just kept staying on this story. And in fact, I just found an update on it. Girls say school forced physical exams. This is from 99. The update. This was an update. but this had happened, I think, in 95. Two teenage girls testified Tuesday they were forced to undergo gynecological examinations at J.T. Lambert Intermediate School in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, 3 years ago. All right, so 3 years ago, this is 99, where that made that 96. Okay, and our documentary came out that same year. Okay, so we moved that on that one fast. In a tearful testimony in federal court in Scranton, one of the girls said she tried to tell the nurse she was making a mistake, that her family doctor had given her physical examination the previous summer for a Christian camp, and that she'd returned the paperwork to the school proving it. The girl said a school nurse told her she could not find the paperwork and then instructed her to remove her pants and get up on the table. The girl, now 15, was 11 at the time, was given on March 19th, 1996, and names the doctor, one of the doctors hired by the school district to give physical exams to students entering kindergarten and sixth grade. Physical exams are mandated by Pennsylvania School Health Law School for all students, Pennsylvania School Health Law for all students entering kindergarten and sixth grade. In a pretrial ruling, the judge in the case stated, quote, nothing in the statute provides how the physical exams to be conducted, end quote. Quote, I felt her finger go in my vagina, end quote, the girl said, crying, quote, I hurt, end quote, she said, quote, it was horrible, end quote. She said it hurt physically, but even more mentally. The parents of 8 girls are suing the doctor, 2 nurses, and the school district, claiming they violated their children's constitutional rights to be free from unreasonable search and seizure, as well as their privacy rights and parental liberty rights. The lawyer for the school district, Ray Thomas of East Rock Hill, said the district had absolute legal obligation to perform the physical exams and asserted the nurses and doctor behaved professionally. Thomas referred to the state police investigation that followed the incident, which touched off a firestorm of controversy and emotion at school board meetings, and said no wrongdoing was found. And it goes on from there. I got to go back and see if we can find the audios where Michael and I covered this, but we broke this. And look, it says right there, Paul Tucker. Let me go back here. Yep, because this is what she told us. She said, this is Katie Tucker. She said, she told the nurse that, quote, my parents won't like this, end quote, and she asked to use the telephone, but the request was denied. The girl said she was told she had to be checked for sexually transmitted diseases, and, quote, to see if we were developing right, end quote. The girl's father, Paul Tucker, now that's who contacted us, was the father, Paul, and his wife. Sadly, the wife has since passed away. Paul Tucker said when her daughter should be his, arrived at home that day from the school, the first words out of her mouth were, Dad, you have to kill someone for me, end quote. I remember this now. I remember this line and everything. Tucker, an electrician by trade, said the experience crushed his daughter. He said he was upset by the experience and angered by the fact he never received an explanation from the school district on how they lost the paperwork from the family doctor and why the school doctor touched his daughter's genitals. Thomas, in an opening statement, said the school document governing the school physicians refers only to genital exams for boys. And it goes on from there. But this is bringing back memories.
This is horrible.
This is, let's see here. We broke that story. Michael Reagan and I broke that story. And I'm bringing that up at length today just to show you that this kind of stupidity. And by the way, we introduced them to John Whitehead and the Rutherford Institute, and they sued in federal court. We put the families who didn't have the money. These were working families in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. They didn't have the money. And we introduced them to the Rutherford Institute, and they did win a small case for them in federal court. But all of that, whether it's the Rachel Stout story that Michael R. Reagan and I broke, or this East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania that we broke, this story, this is the same thing we're fighting today. Is it not?
Absolutely. It's exactly the same. There are violations of bodily autonomy left and right. In California, if your child is 12, you are no longer allowed to have access to your child's medical records.
What?
Yeah. And in 2011, Governor Brown signed into law a new law saying that if your child is 12 and older, they can make their own decision about all preventative measures for sexually transmitted diseases. So that meant they could decide on their own if they wanted hepatitis B vaccine at age 12, or if they wanted HPV vaccine, which is Gardasil, and that's the one that's supposed to be preventing cervical cancer, both at the age of 12. Ironically, he also signed into law on the very same day a bill saying that if kids were younger than 18, they weren't allowed to use a tanning bed because they didn't know whether or not they would get burned. But he said that they would understand the package insert material for the HPV vaccine and the hepatitis B vaccine at age 12. And it's so insane here. There's so many laws they're trying to pass in California to remove the children from the parents again and again and again.
Where's this leading? What is the end game goal here, Alix?
Well, I think you're onto something. I mean, I have that Rockefeller report also from the 1970s, and I think that they are trying to remove parents from the children in a myriad of ways, as you said. And, you know, if you look at AI that's coming in, there is a bigger picture there. You know, if AI is going to take over jobs, whether they be intellectual or physical jobs, there isn't going to be a need for as many people, and they're going to need very compliant people to actually be able to survive in that kind of atmosphere where it's going to be really easy to get an AI robot or AI agent to do a lot of the work. So they need very compliant people in the future, and they want fewer of us.
And they want fewer of us. The infertility rate in America is getting quite high, is it not?
Yes. Yeah, for myriad reasons. I believe some of that is due to vaccination, especially the COVID vaccines, or actually I should call them COVID shots. I won't call them vaccines. And then the toxic soup that we live in, including glyphosate, which is it's the herbicide used in Roundup that's used on most corn and soy in the United States, and even wheat, even though it's supposedly not grown with the use of Roundup. Glyphosate is sprayed on wheat to dry it out to make it easier to harvest. So people are getting it in every single bite of food unless they're eating totally organic.
Mm-hmm. Now, my wife has celiac disease. So it's gluten allergies that turned into celiac. And now, of course, if she gets the wrong lettuce that's been sprayed, her lips go numb and start tingling. If she gets introduced to the wrong chemicals, her throat swells to the point her doctor has prescribed a EpiPen. She's highly allergic to stuff now. And this has all developed over the last 10 years.
It's such a tragedy.
And I don't know what brought it on. But when you talk about all this being sprayed on the crops, you have to wonder at some point just the accumulation over and over and over and over. It finally is a tipping point because, you know, her response is the older I get, the worse my allergies are getting. And I think it's not so much the older you get, it's just the time period of increased number of years of increased exposure and digestion. And now your system just can't handle any more of this. It's reached a point where it's very, very difficult for your immune system and your body to deal with this.
That's right. Yeah. But nothing will throw people over the cliff toward allergy and autoimmunity faster than vaccination. But I totally agree with you. It's the entire toxic soup that's going into us every day of our lives. And you can't even prevent most of it. There's overspray that's going to be on your organic crops as well. Those are not like totally safe either. If you grow your own food in the backyard, there's aluminum raining down from the spraying. And so even your own food is going to have aluminum. My friend Mike Adams, who runs Brighteon and Natural News, he even sources his chlorella that he sells in his store from a place that grows it under a greenhouse because it's the only chlorella that doesn't have aluminum in it from the spraying. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And I happen to be one of the people who thinks that vaccines have a lot to do with celiac disease. First of all, it's an autoimmune condition. And remember when we were talking about, you know, whatever you're eating or drinking or inhaling at the time of a vaccination, you can start making antibodies to it. Well, celiac disease is defined by your body making IgG and IgA antibodies to certain proteins. And that's what vaccines are designed to do. They make your body make IgG antibodies. So, most people, 70% of their diet is wheat. So if you're constantly eating wheat and you're getting vaccines, I think that's flipping people over into celiac disease where they make antibodies to the proteins in wheat, which also then react to self.
Because we're not seeing these problems in the UK, right? Where all this stuff is banned.
No, we do see it in the UK as well. I don't know the numbers there, but it's worldwide.
Well, people are telling me they go to the UK, and they eat bread, and they don't have the reaction there they do here, because I thought the UK I thought they had banned spraying some of this on their wheat.
Well, there's a difference between somebody who's gluten intolerant and somebody who's a pure celiac. Celiac is the person I described. I think it's about 1% of the population, or it was last time I looked, where they make those IgA and IgG antibodies as measured in the blood. But 40% of people, again, last time I looked at the data, have gluten intolerance, and that could be multifactorial. That could be more of a reaction to the glyphosate in the bread and other things that they're putting in the bread.
You are so knowledgeable. How long have you been doing this?
I have been doing this as long as I've been trying to fully recover, which is 30 years.
Oh, you've been doing this 30 years.
Yeah.
Well, no
yeah, I
wonder
just
you're
turned
so-
60.
Huh?
I just turned 60.
She looks 60, Logan? I would have never guessed that. Okay.
Thank
wow.
you.
So whatever you're doing is working.
Side effect of all the stuff I have to do to be able to be productive does have side effects that benefit the skin, for sure.
Well, you're an amazing guest, and I want to get you back. Let me ask you in closing, tell me about Bobby Kennedy Jr. Are you happy with the results he's getting? Is he running into a lot of roadblocks? Is he discouraged? I know we got a new FDA director coming in, I think. What are your thoughts on the current situation in DC with all that?
Oh boy, that's such a big question. How much time do we have left?
No, just go. Just go.
Just go.
Just go.
Okay. So there's two schools of thought on Bobby Kennedy. I mean, people like me, we've been fighting for 30 years to have somebody like this in such a prominent position in our government, and we finally get it. And then there's people who are more new to the issue. They just found out, for example, that vaccines could be dangerous in 2021 when we got the COVID shots. So I feel like the people who've been in this a lot longer time are much more forgiving of the pace of progress. But the people who are newer to MAHA, what we now call MAHA, are frustrated. They're like, can't he do everything now? And, he had to roll over because, the mRNA flu vaccine was just forced on his administration and now, onto the population. And by the way, the mRNA flu vaccine that's based on the COVID shot technology, that has a 75% adverse reaction rate. I mean, it is such a joke. I mean, what is it saving you from? If 75% of people have symptoms after they get it, a certain portion of those people won't be able to go to work because of those symptoms. And what's the point? The whole point is so you don't get ill and miss work, right? So there's stuff like that that's really frustrating for everybody. But let me say something that's going to shock you and your audience. And I'm going to talk about Bobby Kennedy and the fact that everybody in MAHA is mad at him for endorsing the MMR vaccine. And he was forced to say the MMR vaccine is the best way to prevent measles. And I think everybody remembers that. He finally said it on April 7th, 2025. And the reason he was forced to say that is because there was a measles outbreak in the beginning of 2025, and that's where he was going through the Senate confirmation hearings, and that's when he was actually sworn into office as head of HHS. Well, the measles epidemic started to go up and up and up after that, and they were trying to get him to say that phrase, endorsing the measles and mumps rubella vaccine, from the beginning of his term as head of HHS, and he wouldn't play along. And I saw the headlines about him. I've actually traced this. I have a whole presentation on how measles is political, not seasonal. And you can see that every time they prod him, the measles cases go up. They start hammering him for recommending vitamin A, saying that it's the wrong treatment, even though it's standard of care according to the American Academy of Pediatrics and the WHO. Then that didn't work. And then they start hammering him and they say that vitamin A is toxic. And that doesn't get him to say what they want him to say. Well, finally, what happened in West Texas, as everybody knows, there was a couple Mennonite girls who had measles. And according to their parents, their measles was mostly resolved, but they both ended up in the hospital in West Texas. And what happened in West Texas is it's insane. It's unforgivable, but they used a lot of the COVID era protocols, not remdesivir, but the ventilation, the over-drugging, the withholding of antibiotics. All of that happened when we were locked down and people were in the hospital, but they used those same techniques on these two girls in the hospitals. And these two girls died of hospital mismanagement. Well, guess what? The media came out and they said, these girls died of measles. And every medical doctor who's independently reviewed the records says it was hospital mismanagement. The parents say they did not die of measles. But that was it. That was too much political and media pressure on Bobby Kennedy, and he knew what they were up to. And I'm going to say it right here. I believe they used that to blackmail him into saying what they wanted him to say, which was endorsing the measles vaccine to prevent measles. And so he finally said, he went to Daisy's funeral, the second girl who died in the hospital, and he finally said it, the MMR is the best way to prevent measles. And I'm sticking with this. I think he was blackmailed.
Wow. And explain to our audience why the mRNA in these shots, or if they put it in food, why it's so dangerous.
Oh, that's another long answer, but we know that it prevents your DNA from repairing itself. They used a chemical called pseudouridine. That pseudo means false, and uridine is, I think, a chemical, but it's not supposed to be in your body. That was used to stabilize the mRNA, and that made it persist in the body. And we don't know how long it persists in the body. We don't know how long somebody's cells are going to continue to make the spike protein. And some people, we think there's no off switch, and people's bodies are just going to keep making the spike protein, which is a toxin. It's a toxin, and they basically turned people into spike production factories with the mRNA technology. There's a much higher incidence of cancers now. There's a much higher incidence of autoimmunity and neurological disorders in the vaccinated. And, you know, in the beginning in 2021 and somewhat in 2022, you could also see the effects of shedding onto the people who chose not to get the vaccines. And you saw some of those same effects in people who didn't get the COVID shots if they were in close contact with people who had just had the vaccines. They are not benign substances. They should be taken off the market immediately.
I want to show her website again. So much information there on her website. If you want to go there, it's freenowfoundation.org, freenowfoundation.org. You can find out about her show, her podcast, all of it right there on her website. Lots of information, folks, that you can check out. And again, she's got a big event coming up Saturday, September 12th in Silicon Valley with Dale Bigtree. So again, all of it's there at freenowfoundation.com. All right. I'm so thankful Nicole introduced us to you. Would you come back again, please?
Yeah, I would love to. And just so people know what we do, we file lawsuits to end those draconian student mandates for children who go to school in California. But wins in those lawsuits will also help other states who are under similar mandates. But California is the worst. So we have the worst plaintiff situations here. So this is where we can crack that code. And
I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse or not, but what's going on with all these mosquitoes? I mean, we just found out they dropped 1.5 million mosquitoes, according to the public health department in Tennessee, in my county, which we used to never see mosquitoes in my backyard hardly ever. Now this summer, it gets toward dusk. You got to get out of there. I don't get outside a lot, but on a weekend, I like to go out there on the weekend and play some gin with my wife. But come dusk, we have to run back inside. We never had mosquitoes. This is not Wisconsin. This is not Minnesota. But I look it up, 1.5 million dropped in my county. Are you following this kind of stuff too?
I'm not following mosquitoes. I'm so narrowly focused on vaccines and freeing the children from the mandates. But I do know that, nature's an ecosystem, and you can't put GMO mosquitoes into it and think that you're going to have a good result. We cannot play God.
No, you sure can't. There it is, freedomnowfoundation.org, freedomnowfoundation.org. Alix, thank you for your 30-year fight. Thank you so much on behalf of all of us.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Thanks for having me on your show. It's been a real pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you. You know so much.
Well, you're very kind, and ditto. We look forward to having you back.
Would love to.
Alex Meyer checking in. Alex Meyer checking in tonight. freedomnowfoundation.org. And we'll be right back after this break.
Take a look at the water you just poured. It looks clean, it tastes fine, but what's really in it? Lead, fluoride, arsenic, chlorine, pesticides, PFAS forever chemicals, pharmaceutical residues, and bacteria. Every single day, these toxins flow straight from your tap into your glass, into your family. It's time for Sentry H2O from Worldview Water. Sentry H2O is the ultimate water treatment technology, designed to remove harmful toxins, balance your water's pH, and enrich it with essential minerals like calcium and magnesium, the way nature intended. From commercial-scale systems to whole-house filtration to crisp, delicious drinking water right at your kitchen sink and shower, Sentry H2O delivers cleaner, healthier water everywhere you need it. And here's the best part. It installs in just 15 minutes. No plumber, no tools, no plumbing knowledge required. Perfect for homes, apartments, rentals, RVs, refrigerators, and more. Because everyone deserves access to clean, healthy water, including you, including your family. Visit worldviewwater.net. That's worldviewwater.net. And discover what truly clean water can do for your health.
Join me now in studio is JB Hixson. He was in studio for our 1 o'clock Central, 2 Eastern radio show / television show on those 75 terrestrial stations. And he's back tonight to join us in studio. JB, great to have you in studio. Thanks for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. What a blessing, and thanks for having me on.
It all kind of happened quick. We weren't really planning this, but it all worked out, and found out you were not too far away. So we're like, well, come on into the studio.
Yeah, anytime we get a chance to visit another state, this is our first time in Tennessee this year. So we typically do 30 to 40 states a year. So this checks this one off.
Good. Check the Tennessee one off the box. Well, let's start tonight talking about Gog Magog, because we have this Mecca agreement. And I'm going to read from the Middle East Council on Global Affairs. And the headline is the Mecca Agreement from Imported Security to Regional Joint Security. The extent of regional and international media coverage of the Mecca Joint Defense Agreement between Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan reflects profound shifts in regional power balances. The new partnership raises questions well beyond the text agreement and prompts an examination of the security trajectories that will shape the future of the Middle East. That's just the first paragraph. Isn't that something? And for Bible prophecy students, JB, they're going to automatically recognize Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan. Now, it seems as though Saudi Arabia sits on the sideline in the Ezekiel 38-39 Gog Magog war. Get your thoughts on that. But obviously Turkey and then Pakistan. And Pakistan, of course, has nuclear weapons.
Oh, yeah.
And then Turkey has a massive military.
Yeah, when I saw that, it just jumps off the page because, I was looking at the source that I saw was the Middle East news, and it said Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan. I go, wait a minute. I mean, when have those nations all sort of shake hands in a pledge? And the other thing is Turkey's supposed to be part of NATO. How is this not in violation of NATO? It's like they're forming their own NATO. So
Yes.
now they're a part of two separate groups. That doesn't seem to be fair,
So anyone who studies Bible prophecy, though, is going to notice this. And, of course, the question is, where does Iran come into this? Are they eventually going to add Iran to this, or will they come to the defense of Iran? You have Iran saying that, doing what they are to Israel, talking about Israel the way they do all the time. You have Turkey. Erdogan wants this revived Ottoman Empire. He's talking about conquering Jerusalem. You now, by the way, have this week Jews going up on the Temple Mount with their prayer books and praying. I mean, some are saying this could start a war in itself.
Yeah.
But Turkey and obviously Iran would be united in their view about the temple and Temple Mount, would they not?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to take much to light a spark here that just becomes a global conflagration. I hope not, but we know Bible prophecy, and we certainly see all the saber rattling and all just these geopolitical events happening. As far as Iran, I think the best guess I have is that something's going to happen centered with Iran. Somebody's going to make somebody mad, and that's when you're going to see this other alliance, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, so forth, kind of jump in and join the battle. But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. We talk about the Battle of Gog Magog. It's a clear, key end times battle from Ezekiel 38 and 39. Exactly when it happens in the sequential order of timeline events, that's a little bit harder to peg, and a lot of different dispensational scholars have put it in different places. But here's how I think it's going to unfold, Brennan. I think what we're going to see is this northern alliance, Ezekiel 38, starts to form. They invade Israel, Ezekiel 38:16. And then I bring in Daniel 11, where in verse 44, there's a Western alliance that forms, and they protest, and they say, hey, you can't do that. And so they begin to come in, at least ostensibly, for Israel's defense. Mainly, they're all just battling over the land.
And who do you think that Western defense is?
Well, I don't know, but my speculation is the leader of it is the guy who becomes the Antichrist. Because what happens is, we know from Ezekiel that God's the one that supernaturally intervenes and protects Israel from that northern alliance.
And then he
takes credit for it.
He tries to steal all the glory.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he says, oh, look what I did. I've solved this major conflict. It propels him to world fame. Everybody's looking to him. And that's when he swoops in and orchestrates the covenant with Israel, confirms the covenant, which of course then starts the clock ticking on the 70th week of Daniel.
Which of course then brings up the question, will this happen if people believe in the pre-tribulation rapture as we do, because it's what's taught in the text? If this happens, it sounds more and more like it would happen after the rapture if you have the Antichrist so heavily involved, unless we're here to see it but don't realize that individual's the Antichrist, who doesn't really fully unveil himself until sometime after the Gog Magog invasion. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a tricky question because we believe very firmly in the doctrine of imminency, which is that the rapture could happen at any moment. That doctrine's clearly taught in Scripture. We've done a lot of work on that in some of our presentations and books. So the question then becomes, if Gog Magog takes place before the rapture, does that destroy the doctrine of imminency? I don't think it does. I think you can make a case that there are prophetic events that are not tied to one another that theoretically could happen before the rapture, but because we don't know whether or not they will, we still look to the rapture as imminent. But I'm more comfortable with the view that everything happens after the rapture, that the rapture truly is the next event on God's prophetic timeline. For that reason, for example, the way I interpret 1948 is that it's prophetically significant, it's setting the stage, it's laying the groundwork, but I don't tie it to a particular scripture the way some Bible teachers do. I respect that, and I'm not going to die on that hill, but I don't say that 1948 fulfilled a prophecy. I think it's laying the groundwork for the return that will happen in connection with Christ's return at the end of the tribulation. So I think the rapture happens. That starts the tidal wave of all of the end times events. In fact, I've got a chart if you want to throw it up
let's
there.
Take a look at it.
So this is my end times chart, pretty rudimentary, pretty basic. Any dispensational framework is going to have something very similar.
And can I stop you right there? Dispensational, for those who don't know, define that.
Yeah, so it's a biblical term, the Greek word oikonomos. It's used 7 times in Scripture, and it refers to a stewardship or economy. And it basically just explains that, look, as you survey human history, it's self-evident that God has operated in different ways over time. So if I put up the God's plan of the ages here, we're living in the last days, but it's clear that God interacted, say, with Adam and Eve differently than we do. I mean, I don't know if you like to garden. Brandon, do you garden?
I do not.
Okay,
I would like to, but I don't have that. There's a lot of things I'd love to do for hobbies, to be honest with you, but I don't have the time. But yes, I would love to garden. I've done it in the past. I would love to do that again, but the time is not there.
I don't have a green thumb. I don't do it either. But
I'm
I'll
not
tell
sure
you
I have
what,
a green thumb, but I do like gardening, but I don't have time.
But when people do garden today, I don't think they garden in the nude, the way Adam and Eve did, right?
No.
So that's
I don't
clearly
do that,
a
do I,
different...
Logan? There's definitely none of that going on.
Logan's going, thank you. Yes, you don't.
Thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Lord. No, so my point is, things were different with Adam and Eve. Not different ways of salvation. Obviously, people are saved in every age the same way by grace through faith. But God interacted with Noah differently than he did us. He interacted with Abraham. Obviously, during the time of the law, he interacted differently. Now we're living in the church age, which the Bible calls the last days. So back to your question, what is dispensationalism? Fundamentally, it's just a way to study the Bible that looks at the literal, grammatical, historical rendering of the text, takes words in the way they were intended to be taken. It does not allegorize or spiritualize the text. Words mean what they say. And when you approach the Scripture that way, you necessarily and inevitably will arrive at a distinction between Israel and the church. God has a plan that is still ongoing for his chosen nation, Israel, that involves a kingdom and a throne and a temple, and Christ, the King of Kings, reigning on that throne. And God has a plan for the church, which is center stage right now in this present age. So if you think about from a literal, grammatical, historical perspective, what we call a dispensational perspective, then, this is kind of the way the end times plays out. You've got the rapture is the next event on God's prophetic calendar. And then notice you'll see that preparation period of unknown length. A lot of guys leave that off their chart. I think that's a mistake because clearly the rapture and the signing of the covenant, Daniel 9:27, are 2 separate events. if they're two separate events, and they are, they must necessarily be separated by some length of time. How long is that? I tend to think it's probably months. Some people put it longer, some people put it shorter, but they're two different events, so you've got some period of time between them. And I think that's when a bunch of stuff's going to start to unfold in the chaos of the rapture after millions of people have disappeared. So that's when that Northern Alliance, I think, forms, taking advantage of the mayhem to come against Israel. The Western Alliance protests led by the future Antichrist, and eventually God protects Israel. This man that becomes the Antichrist takes credit, steals the glory, as you said, and then he propels himself to confirming that covenant. And then you get into the 7-year tribulation. So, yeah, that's kind of the way I see it playing out relative to Gog Magog.
And I want to get, as we move forward into Gog Magog, something that I just found on the Jerusalem Post that actually answers my question from a while ago, which is, what about Iran when it comes to this Mecca agreement? I just found something while you were talking, and I want to show it. But first, I have to ask this. If you are watching what's going, well, let me go ahead and add this, because I was stalling, to be honest with you, to get the email over to Logan in the control room, because he has my computer, so I can't show you normally what I would, because he has control of the computer right now. Logan, can you show what I just found while he was talking? I just found an article at the Jerusalem Post. There it is. Look at that. Because I asked, well, what about Iran in this Mecca agreement? And look at what we now find from the Jerusalem Post, dated August 23rd. That was 2 days ago. I don't know how I missed this one.
Wow.
Because the news cycle is running that fast. That's how. Had you seen this?
No, I hadn't.
See, and both of you and I watch the news like crazy. And what is happening is even things are getting through that we aren't seeing. Yeah. And it's not because we're not watching. Because I bet you, like me, you visit 50 to 100 websites a day searching for news. But it's almost to the point where you cannot keep up. Things are moving so quickly. Let's go back to that headline. Jerusalem Post, August 23rd. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Pakistan invited Iran to join the newly established Mecca Defense Pact. Now, you tell me how that is not the coalition of Gog Magog with Saudi Arabia going, what? And sitting on the sideline.
Yeah, and see, the nature of
what the text seems to imply.
Oh, absolutely, that's what the text implies. And the words of the pact itself are, it's a defense pact, which means they're saying we're going to help each other if something happens. And so I think that the groundwork is being laid, then something's going to happen where they all pick up the hot phone and go, hey, this is our time. We got to align ourselves together. We got to come together. Remember, we promised to help each other. So yeah, now you've got Iran in the mix. That's amazing. But you're right. You know, we've been on the road, and I feel like if I am offline for even a day, I'm missing stuff because it just happens so fast. And this kind of thing happens a lot where I do an interview, typically on the road or from a hotel room or something, and some breaking news has happened and I'm hearing about it for the first time. Yeah.
Because it's moving that fast. And I wasn't on the road traveling, but somehow just this slipped through. Yeah. But I went looking for it. Yeah. So I ask you, well, what about Iran in this scenario? And so I went looking for it while you were talking. And so sometimes you actually have to just ask questions and then to go look for it because the news cycle is that heavy right now that it's hard to find stories because there's a flood of them. Now, this goes back to what are we going to do with Turkey being a member of NATO? Yeah. If Turkey moves against Israel, Israel protects itself. What's the United States going to do? Is Article 5 going to kick in and Israel's now going after Turkey and the U.S. is now required to, according to Article 5, to defend Turkey? People argue, are they absolutely legally bound to respond? I'm not sure they are, but that's in there. So does the United States just say, nah, we can't get involved in this? Or has Trump been impeached, been removed from office, and you have J.D. Vance sitting there, who I think is an absolute radical. He was defending Huey Long over the weekend, a communist. He's talking in his book, which I think I've showed you guys, that he's talking to the dead, right?
Oh, yeah, yep.
It calls the cemetery the temple of the dead, talking to his dead relatives, and they're giving him things back. Empathy, courage, etc. So he's getting something back when he talks to him. Yeah. So apparently he thinks they're talking back to him. So if we have J.D. Vance for president, who knows what? Maybe J.D. Vance doesn't ever become president. Maybe Trump isn't impeached. I don't know what's going to happen. And maybe J.D. Vance isn't even the GOP nominee. I don't know. Maybe you end up with some radical that becomes president from the DNC. And does that then cancel out our ever getting involved? And we just sit back and watch.
Yeah, I tell you what, J.D. Vance concerned me when I first heard that he was picked back during the campaign. A lot of people are not aware of his background. Most people just parrot what they hear on all the, the talking points from the mainstream conservative news. But I mean, this guy was discipled by Curtis Yarvin and funded by Peter Thiel. You could scarcely get two more Luciferian connected men than Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance. So yeah, he gives me great pause. And as far as Trump being impeached, I mean, there are any number of ways that J.D. could end up in the White House. As they say, the vice president's a heartbeat away from the White House. So we certainly hope nothing like that ever happens, but we certainly know they've tried to take out Trump. If needed, the powers that be can certainly put J.D. Vance in that position. And he is no friend of Israel. He's no friend of Christians. He said that being a Christian is like joining a club. He hopes his wife will join the club. Remember that?
Yeah. Well, in his book, he says how he sat in a great rage listening to a pastor preach about the second coming.
Oh, yeah.
Set in a rage.
Wow. Yeah, no, they don't like it. Yeah, and as far as talking to the dead, he's talking to somebody. It's not the souls of deceased people, but it's demonic at its core, and that's quite
what common
troubling.
theme just came to me? You've got J.D. Vance saying he goes to the temple of the dead to talk to his dead relatives, and you've got his friend, Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson's son worked for Vance in the White House, in the old executive office building. We know that because we were trying to set up an interview a year ago, May of 2025, when we were in D.C. to interview the vice president because he is the vice president. But I'm not shocked. They don't want to take interviews from a legitimate news guy. They want pancake, patty cake, Barney, I love you kind of stuff. But that was Tucker Carlson's boy we were going through. And we're shocked we were blocked, apparently. But JD is talking to the dead, according to his book, and so they're answering back. So who's talking to him? If they're answering back and giving him faith and hope and empathy and all these things he said, who's giving that to him?
Yeah.
It's not the dead. And then Tucker says he was attacked by a demon.
Yeah.
So isn't it interesting? Some of these people may be more involved in activities than they even know.
Yeah, it takes one to know one. But I mean, I remember several years ago, back during Trump's first campaign, critiquing Tucker, even back then when he was still the darling of many conservatives, and pointing out that that he's well connected, obviously, but his kids worked in Washington, D.C. as interns and staff members for different congressmen. So he's his finger, the Beltway shadow government fingerprints are all over Tucker and his background. But yeah, that is an interesting connection there, common ground. Yeah.
And I think we might see more of that as the days unfold. I-24 News out of Israel, they put out on August 9th the Mecca alliance is a very dangerous and very troubling development. Saudi Arabia was essentially sitting on the fence. It already had a defense agreement with Pakistan, but the moment it goes with the Turks, who are in a direct confrontation with us, one that could develop to dimensions that may have extremely serious consequences, both in the Mediterranean and on the Syrian front. This is a development that is very, very bad for us, for Israel. It requires us to deepen our alliances with Greece and Cyprus, the United Arab Emirates, and Somaliland. And that's being reported by I-24 News out of Israel.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people have any idea just how tense things are over there right now with the whole Strait of Hormuz thing, and just there's a lot of backroom deals happening. We're distracting. That's the Hegelian dialectic. That's the classic move, is to distract. But real consequential things are happening, and I think we better be prepared for sure. But I want to go back to Turkey because I remember when the Ukraine-Russia war started, there were plenty of things that Erdogan was saying and even doing that made me think, look, how can they stay in NATO? They ought to be expelled. They ought to be, the other NATO nations. Sorry, you got in front of
your camera bringing me. I'm sorry, babe. She doesn't normally. She didn't. That camera is not normally one that we use, and so normally she can slip in, no one knows.
Yeah.
But there you go. You got this.
Very cool.
She had to bring me my protein tablets so that I are filled up and don't eat junk
That's
food.
good.
So anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that, Turkey's, to me, been questionable in terms of their commitment to NATO for several years now. And so what's it going to take before the rest of the NATO nations, see what everybody else sees and go, wait a minute, which one doesn't belong? Turkey's violating us, if not in literalness, in spirit, at every turn. Erdogan is on record saying he wants to destroy Israel. Israel's an ally. So, I don't know. I feel like at some point, but this also goes to show that these NATO nations, there's some, higher power, not, to so to speak, that's kind of controlling them. Because at face value, why wouldn't America and these other nations just come together and say, hey, Turkey, no thanks, you're done. We don't need you anymore.
Well, let's talk about that, this higher power that's controlling them.
Yeah.
Because we go over to Daniel chapter 10, Daniel's praying, and this angel shows up and says, hey, your prayer was heard from the first day. I was delayed because of the prince of Persia, Iran.
Oh, yeah.
So there seems to be a demonic entity over nations, right? Now, the New Apostolic Reformation crowd take it too far, and they start saying we got to bind these demons that are over every city and every town and whatever. They go too far with it because we don't see that in the Bible, us to bind Satan. In fact, Michael the archangel in Jude, when Satan encounters him over the body of Moses, he said, the Lord rebuke you, and he did not offer a reviling accusation. So there's no pattern in the scripture for Christians to talk to Satan, to yell at Satan, to bind Satan. As someone once said, if Satan keeps getting bound, who keeps letting him loose, right?
Right.
But only is he bound finally at the end of the tribulation period, and bound for 1,000 years and released one more time for one final great conflict. And then he's thrown into the lake of fire for eternity, where for that 1,000 years already has been Antichrist and the false prophet. But while the New Apostolic Reformation takes it too far, thinking that they got to do prayer walks around city halls and take dominion away from demons overseeing cities or states, there is, however, in the Bible, an indication that maybe demonic activity is taking place over certain nations at powerful levels. And it seems as though even Michael the archangel may be that special guardian angel of the nation of Israel.
Oh, look, there's no question from Scripture that there's a hierarchy in the celestial realm among both fallen and unfallen angels, the good guys and the bad guys. So, the fact is, Satan has been trying to take over control of the world since his failed coup attempt in heaven, and he's conspiring. If you want to show this chart, it's the greatest conspiracy of all time, the Luciferian conspiracy. Satan conspiring with evil celestial beings and human accomplices. That's the conspiracy. So there are real Luciferian elites on earth in dark smoke-filled rooms that are secretly taking their marching orders straight from Satan, the way you and I pray to Almighty God. They think he's the hero. They think he's the protagonist in the Garden of Eden, and God is the antagonist. And so this is long-standing. It's been going on for 6,000 years. But you better believe there's a dark side. And, what I've tried to expose in some of my recent books is that this spirit of phenomena, this evil, demonic activity going on in the unseen realm is really starting to bubble over, which to me is a sign of the times. Because you read through Revelation, you just wrote an extended multi-volume commentary on it. There are all kinds of signs of the times, celestial signs, things that are not of this world that take place in the lead up to Christ's triumphant return. So it only follows that the closer we get to that, we're going to see more of this kind of activity happening. So, and it's becoming normalized, it's becoming marginalized, but the Luciferianism is really the key framework behind all of this. People call it the shadow government, the deep state, global elites. There are a number of names for it, but let's never forget, as you just pointed out, Brandon, it is at its core a spiritual battle. It's a cosmic battle between God, the creator of the universe, and Satan, his archenemy, and it will reach its apex when Satan indwells a human being, the Antichrist, sets himself up as God, and for a brief period of time finally gets what he's wanted all along, a place on the throne and worldwide worship.
So there seems to be an alignment of nations like we've never seen before. Militarily, economically, nations that, never in world history had a military economic alliance. They're now doing that, whether through the Mecca joint agreement, whether through the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Now they want to add Iran to the BRICS system. It brings up the question, why do these people continue to mock us when we are studying the Bible in context, taking it literal where it's meant to be taken literally, not allegorizing it, not spiritualizing it, And oftentimes the symbolism is explained a few verses later if you just keep reading. We see that in Daniel. We see that in Revelation. And yet what we've been telling and saying is coming to pass. I don't see the nirvana, the dominionism, the establishing the kingdom of God that the amillennialists run around claiming.
Yeah.
Do you?
No, not at all. In fact, you mentioned NAR. I mean, they talking about binding Satan. They think that Satan is bound today because the church has replaced Israel. So the way they interpret Revelation is what's called the recapitulation view. Every 3 chapters is just a retelling of the church age. The seals are the church age. The trumpets are the church age. The millennium is the church age. And so they really think Satan is bound today. Well, if Satan's bound today, Brandon, man, I'd hate to see what it's like when he's not bound, because he is the prince of the power of the air, the God of this age, and he is wreaking havoc right now. But all for a time, God's going to make all things new someday, and what a day that will be.
So let's continue on with your PowerPoint. Do you have more slides you want to show?
Yeah. So, again, if you go back to my chart, let me get back there. So, the rapture happens. I think a bunch of things begin to unfold throughout the world, leading to Gog Magog, leading to the signing of the treaty or the confirmation of the treaty in Daniel 9:27. And by the way, after the rapture, while we tend to focus in our end time study on all the stuff happening in prophetic fulfillment on earth, let's not forget there's a couple of important things going on in heaven for the bride of Christ, the church. So we're engaged in the marriage ceremony in heaven and experiencing the Bema judgment, judgment seat of Christ, where we're rewarded for our faithfulness here on earth. Many of those rewards are going to be positions of service that we will then use when we come back with Christ at the end of the 7 years to rule and reign with him. But back to the scene on earth. So the Antichrist signs this confirmation. Then you'll notice it says Israel protected for 3.5 years. That's because they have entered an alliance with a false Messiah, and they are doing the sacrifices, they're worshiping, they think this is all good. But then at the midpoint, something both Daniel and Jesus talk about, you're going to see the Antichrist desecrate the temple, set himself up as God, 2 Thessalonians 2, and demand that the world worship him. And it's at that moment that many of God's Jewish people will recognize in horror what they've done. They will repent. They will head for the hills. And by the time you get 3.5 years later, 1/3 of them, Zechariah tells us, will have looked upon him and whom they pierced. They will believe. Paul says they've got to believe before they can call on him. They'll believe the gospel, be born again, and then they'll cry out, Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So that second half of the tribulation, it changes everything for Israel. They're going to be hunted down, and Christians too, but anyone who won't take the mark, but especially Israel, because the whole 7-year period is Jewish in nature. That's why you have the 144,000 Jewish missionaries, you have the 2 witnesses, you have everything centered around the temple, the Antichrist's temple, which has always puzzled me why people want to fund the building of the temple. I think it's very significant, and I'm excited to see these types of things happening, kind of like the red heifers and that kind of stuff. But let's not forget the next temple to come is the Antichrist's temple. I mean, I'd love to contribute to Ezekiel's temple, but we're not going to need to by then because, the Lord will be back and he'll make it happen. But yeah, I would, there's a difference between seeing the signs of the times and the stage being set and actually doing things that hasten anything that will help the Antichrist. I don't want to do that.
No, I sure don't. Logan, I don't know if you can show that tweet that the president put out. I sent you a social post tweet. Look at that, folks. Very happy to see that Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan have recently and finally signed the Mecca Joint Defense Agreement. It shows how the Middle East is coming together and how countries will finally be able to defend themselves in a more meaningful way. Congratulations to the great leaders of these 3 nations mentioned. This is a big, bold, and important first step. Wow, President Donald J. Trump. Logan, that's legit. That's not a meme. That's a real tweet, right? I mean, our social media, that's real, he says. Yeah. And I found that we were talking, which again, I'm trying not to be too unkind to President Trump, but he just has no discernment and he has no spiritual eyes.
Yeah, I mean,
and I've said to Annie Cyrus and some other folks earlier this week. I said, can you imagine if he were to call people like you and me and Annie Cyrus and Usama and Sharam and Patrick Wood and Courtney Turner and all these different people that we work with together in the cabinet room and said, hey, we're going to have you here all day. We're going to bring in lunch, but I'm going to hear from every one of you as to your concerns, your area of expertise, and give me insight. What should I know that I don't know? Because my handlers, they try to put me in a bubble. They don't let me know stuff. I keep getting caught. I find out things from the press. We've seen him on camera find out some from the press. Like, I didn't know that, really? You're like, how did you not know that? You know, you're the president, for Pete's sake.
Yeah.
What if he did that? I think his response, I don't know what it would be. Would he listen? Would he be humble enough to listen to these people? But I think in one respect, he'd be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
He'd be overwhelmed at what he has not been told, what he does not know. And to think that you have this joint defense agreement between Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, and now they're inviting Iran to join, is a good thing. Clearly shows you he doesn't understand their intentions, and he has no clue what's about to happen to Israel. But of course, some of this would be because he's got a wacko nut job for a spiritual advisor, Paula White, who I think clearly believes in replacement theology. While she talks nicely about Israel, I think in the end of the day, the NAR crowd believes Israel is the church.
Yeah. I mean, beyond just the spiritual lack of discernment here, which, one can understand coming from Trump, to me, there's a geopolitical naivete here in that statement. I mean, you're literally praising an alliance that could, end up coming against you, right? These are some pretty powerful nations, and, they are forming an alliance. And for him to think this is a good thing and not see the obvious that it could, depending on which way the wind blows, end up blowing back on him, on America, which his job as the commander-in-chief is to protect America. To me, that's even more significant than spiritual. I've come to expect that kind of spiritual lack of discernment. I don't. He's a hard one to figure out. I mean, because sometimes, he says things and it really resonates, and you go, yes, that's what we need. And he certainly has done a lot of great things. But sometimes you see tweets like this, and you go, I don't know if he's just trolling. Is he trying to provoke them? But this is not. A good thing on any front, but certainly not on a spiritual front if you know the Bible. If you believe the Bible, which we believe the Bible is our only standard for our beliefs, attitudes, and practices, these very nations are the ones that are going to ultimately turn against Israel. So at the very least, it shows a lack of awareness of the biggest threats to Israel.
So did you ever, and I ask this often, I've maybe even asked you this, did you ever anticipate being here to see so much of this unfolding as it is?
I did not. No, of course, you grow up. I grew up in a Christian home, was taught pre-tribulational dispensational teaching from God's word. And so for the longest time, like so many, I just assumed that things were going to hum along pretty normal, and all of a sudden we're going to be caught up to meet the Lord in the air, the trumpet's going to sound, and then things would go crazy. But it's only been over the last 15 years as I've been researching my Spirit of the Antichrist series, which, by the way, I don't know if I can put that up there, but just as a quick shout out, this came out in 22 and 23.
This here?
Yeah, no, let me see if I can find it. Sorry, Logan. But that's when I began to realize, a whole lot can happen long before the rapture. We could be living in essentially a one world system well before the rapture happens. The Antichrist is not going to have time to be able to develop.
Well, and I don't think the New World Order, if you want to call it that, actually is in place fully until he shows up on the scene and rips 3 of them out by the roots.
Yeah. Well, I think...
But I do think you have to have the 10 divisions. Because it talks about those 10 leaders are there, and then the Antichrist.
Right.
So I think you have to have some kind of 10 global leaders from which he then emerges.
Which is
do you agree?
Yeah, I do.
As the 11th.
I do, but I feel like, so this is the Luciferian Conspiracy, the 3-volume set, spiritoftheantichrist.org, where I go back and in painstaking detail outline from Satan's perspective what he's doing to bring about this New World Order. Mm-hmm. But back to your question. So even the 10 regional situation is a one world order.
Absolutely.
Right. So, but you're right. The Antichrist is going to step in after that. And that's my whole point. If the Lord tarries, we could we could already see, we do see this regionalization emerging. I know Patrick Wood has talked about this a lot, Alex Newman. These guys are exactly right. We've written about it in my third volume of that series. This regionalization is happening because, Brandon, it's much easier to get 10 regions to sign on to a one world government than it is 197 nation states.
Absolutely.
You know, yeah.
So while there will be a global order, it won't be the new world order of Antichrist when he shows up, because he's going to have to go to war and rip out 3 by the roots, according to Daniel, and replace them. But it does seem, the text seems to clearly state, out of those 10, then comes the 11th.
Yes.
So you have to have some kind of global governance before the final new world order of Antichrist is established, which is the ripping out of those 3 and replacing them. Now, which really goes to the issue of which 3. Have you ever considered which 3 he might be ripping out?
Yeah, I mean, which 10? I mean, what's the starting point, right? I mean, you've seen the North American Technate map from Cornell University,
Club of Rome,
the Club
United
of Rome's
Nations
map, the United Nations map. So there are any number of groups working, which, by the way, it's a great reminder that the Luciferian conspiracy is by no means monolithic or, a given. There are competing factions and backstabbing and betrayals. You've got the Russian component, the Chinese component, the Western component. Even though Satan has a plan, Satan is the author of confusion. So he's just kind of like a straw in the wind trying to make this thing happen. So there's no telling what those 10 nations will be, but if I knew for sure what the 10 regions or nations or whatever would be, then I could speculate on which 3 are the ones that are going to get ripped out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we're in that time yet. I don't know. But if we are in that time, it could be, for speculation's sake, someone like a Putin who has developed into going for this Eurasia concept, right?
Yeah.
And he's not going along. He's not kind of working with the team, and they want what we talked about on the radio today, $75 trillion in minerals that are in the ground in Russia, and maybe he wants those. The Antichrist seems. Tell me if you ever thought about this. The Antichrist seems as though he is greatly concerned about wealth, about money. And one reason I know that is because in Revelation 17, Antichrist and the 10 world assistants turn and they devour what I think is the false dominant church, described as Revelation 17:1, the woman, the great harlot that sits on many waters, which I think is a false dominant church. Then he turns with his 10 assistants, devours each of her flesh and destroys her, which means just totally stripping her naked. So taking her, making her poor. Why would he want to do that of a false global dominant church? Because of the wealth. When you combine the wealth of the Vatican, which is said to be the most richest corporation in the world, if not second, but probably the premier, that they can't even calculate their wealth if they wanted to. Yeah. And then you add in all the other false religious systems, right? The Southern Baptist Convention with all the land it owns, and then all the other church denominations and all the other false religious systems and all their land. What if this religious system, and with tokenization and with chipping and biometrics and digital ID, they know where everything's at.
Yeah.
And he's able to strip this great harlot, one world religious church, false church, of everything she has, money-wise, monetary-wise, not only influence-wise, but strip her naked, which I think is the image of poverty, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so he seems to be concerned about money.
Yeah.
And would that not then fit with him desiring to get some of these leaders to go along with him, but also go along with him militarily, but also go along with him financially? And he needs those minerals in the ground for his global economic system he's going to put in place, which includes that no one can buy or sell without the mark. Yeah. So is he after $75 trillion under the ground in Russia? I don't know. But I use that as examples to say we often read the Bible and we don't think about it in modern terms of what drives leaders. Yeah. It's commercial trade routes, it's finances, it's sovereign debt, it's military. And when you start thinking that way, as the leaders do today, and they'll be thinking then you're like, well, maybe the Antichrist is really after not just them to go along with him and to really worship him and surrender to him, but they won't go along with him what he wants, which is their military, but he wants their minerals. He wants tokenization. Again, I'm just throwing out theories of why it is a leader like Antichrist would turn against three of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very insightful, Brandon. And we know that money, but Paul said the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. There's no more greater embodiment of evil than Satan and his human counterpart, the Antichrist. And so money, you go back and look through the ages, every major world tyrant has been surrounded by decadence and wealth, and they love to store up things. You think about all the shipwrecks as they were coming over from the New World Order, this wealth was at the bottom of the ocean now. I mean, they love wealth, and it's a sign of power. I mean, the Luciferian agenda really has three components: wealth, power, and perversion, going back to sort of the satanic rituals and some of that stuff, and the sort of the Jeffrey Epstein, that kind of stuff. So, wealth is right there at the top of it. First of all, it takes, in the earthly realm, it takes money. It's a means of exchange, and they want to control it all. That's what the mark of the beast system is. Not only will he won't be content with just owning it all. He wants to make sure there's no mechanism out there for some, capitalist startup person to find a way to scratch and claw their way back into money. You'll have no opportunity to do that. You have to have the mark to buy and sell only at his discretion. So, yeah, I think you're onto something. Certainly in the earthly realm, as things align and alliances are formed and wars happen, money is the key. They're trying to take over regions of the world because of their monetary value, resources, things like that. No doubt.
Is America even around?
Yeah, when all this happens.
Yeah. When we move into the church is removed, you move into the tribulation. Has America been absorbed into a North American Union and they're the 10 unions? Or is America really a collapsed economic and militarily collapsed nation that basically people are tired of? They're tired of them saying, we're sanctioning your dollar. If you do business with this country, we're going to attack you. Now, I understand, I'm not speaking out against President Trump when he says this to or Bessent when he says this to Iran. I understand there's economic war, and you use economic war to stop from having to go to kinetic war, which we're really doing both right now. But this has been going on a long time, and America has done this to the point that's why a lot of people are like, we're sick and tired of this world reserve currency of the dollar, because they try to tell us what to do. And if a country like Libya wants to go to gold, or Saddam Hussein wants to go to gold, these guys end up getting eliminated. Or if the president of Venezuela, Maduro, is talking about trading oil in this dollar, this currency with that country, boom, he seems to be all of a sudden arrested. I don't think people are connecting the dots, and they get a little tired, some of these countries, and I'm not a fan of some of these countries, but they get a little tired of this being under America's thumb. And is there any chance that America just basically has been so destroyed morally, economically, politically, militarily, with an EMP or who knows what else? The power grid goes down. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission guy, formerly with them, was warning again the other day, if the power goes down due to them physically attacking 9 substations, which you could figure out pretty well by studying the internet, and the power goes down, it could go down for 18 months. Well, we know from a study, if the power grid in America goes down for a year, 90% of Americans are dead from disease, starvation, and societal unrest. So the question, I know, is a theory, but is America even around? And I'm reading an article from Telegraph that is from August 25th today. China's new hypersonic missile puts U.S. on notice. Warhead capable of avoiding interception and hitting aerial targets thousands of miles away. Is America even on the scene?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's pretty simple. Actually, we may not know the details, but if we know the Bible, we know that America is not around in the end times as a sovereign nation. Now, my firm belief is that the resources and capabilities and technology and military and those types of things that America has are something that the Luciferians covet. They want it. So I don't look for them intentionally anyway to come in and wipe out all of our military bases, bring this country back to the dark ages, coast to coast, and just obliterate the land. I do think, however, that they're going to, have some kind of targeted poly-crisis that absolutely could include EMPs. It can include attacks on the power grid. It could include terrorist attacks. Any number of weapons are available to them, but there's going to be something that actually is an unfreezing event that brings America to its knees and forces us to then cry out for the solution, which is what they want all along, which is for us to join hands in this new world order, this one world political system. I mean, guys like Kissinger and Rockefeller, they've been talking about this forever. All it's going to take is the right crisis, and then Americans will willingly yield their sovereignty to this new world order. So this is where they're headed. How they get there, I don't know, but I don't think America as we know it is around when all of these end times prophecies begin to unfold. But I don't think, like some people have suggested, that it's going to obliterate the land and bring us back to the dark ages. There's too many things here that they want.
I agree with that. They want assets, right?
Yep.
China would love to invade us and take it, right? And there have been talks that the former Soviet Union and China and these countries all had talks about who's going to get what. And I think China would love to take our fertile, particularly our fertile delta.
Well, they already are.
Right.
Yeah.
They already are buying the farms, aren't
Yeah,
they?
they are.
They would love to grow food and ship it back to their country. So they would like to have some of these resources that they could take and use.
Yeah.
The question is, who ends up occupying? Is it going to be China? Is it going to be
Look, I've said
an Islamic nation?
I mean, I've said many times, Brandon, at prophecy conferences across this country for several years now, has it ever occurred to you, I'll look right at the audience, I'll say, has it ever occurred to you that you could be raptured as a Chinese citizen? I mean, we don't think about that. We don't like to think
Because
about
China
it.
could take over.
Because, we're no longer American citizens. We're owned by China.
And here's the headline today. China's new hypersonic missile puts U.S. on notice.
Yeah.
One has to wonder, and we're going to go to a break here, one has to wonder if we're not being blackmailed, and I've been saying this for years, that we're being blackmailed as a country. And I think Dr. Peter Pry and I discussed this, that President Trump's been told, and other presidents have been told, look, we're in your power grid, we can turn you off. And maybe we're in their power grid too. But we don't have the mentality they do. We're not evil like they are. We don't want to kill millions and millions of innocent civilians like they're willing to do.
Most don't. Most of there is a dark element of our leadership.
Oh, yes, I agree with that.
But most don't.
Most don't.
Right.
And so as a result, are they saying, look, you do this, and this is what we're going to do. And this is why we keep seeing Trump back up and then threaten something and then not do it, threaten something and then not do it.
Oh, I'm confident that he is controlled on some level. I can't prove it.
And he may be controlled by the deep state, but he may be being controlled by our enemies who have told him fully what their capabilities are. And he's like, oh, good grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there was a time in this country, Brandon, I know you're about to go to a break, but when a candidate for office at the national level would have been disqualified for a speeding ticket because it was that hard to get elected, and you had to have a clean as a whistle record. Someone like Donald Trump with his background now in power, I mean, it is a gift that keeps on giving to people that want to control them. That's my view.
Let's take a quick break, come back with J.B. Hixson of notbyworks.org, notbyworks.org. Do you appreciate what we're doing? Here, look how long we've gone already, folks, with no commercial break. I could do this commercial every 15 minutes like most networks do. But if you appreciate the fact we're pushing this all out for free, we need your support. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. Folks, giving drops in July and August like a stone, okay? I saw what came in yesterday online. Again, I had to double check it. I had to refresh the page. I thought that's got to be an error. So, folks, we need you to step up. I know a lot of you are very generous by mail. We'll probably get more support through the mail, but we need you to be generous through the mail and online. Go right now, would you? Some of you could go there, make a contribution, $10, $20. Every little donation helps. But some of you could do more tonight, $200, $500, $1,000. We got to bring in $40,000 a month to cover all of our bills. And one of the biggest bills is IT and bandwidth, because we are shoving out so much traffic. And every time someone watches, that's on our clock. That's on our meter. That's on our dime. We have to pay for it. So the more people that watch, the bigger the bandwidth bill. That's a blessing because we want people watching and learning and ministering to them, but it also becomes a financial situation too. So we need your support, worldviewfoundation.com. Why don't you consider doing that during this break? We'll be right back.
For over 35 years, Brannon House has helped Christians understand the times. Now everything he's built lives in one place, the Worldview Tube Vault. Step inside and you'll find thousands of hours of exclusive programming on the Bible, culture, and the worldview issues shaping our world. Ebooks, audiobooks, documentaries, and decades of teaching, all in one searchable library. There's a brand new courses feature, led by our first release, the Book of Revelation, taught verse by Brannon House. Grave Influence and more courses are on the way. Read Brannon's books, Marxianity, Grave Influence, Religious Trojan Horse, Put Your Beliefs to the Test, and his upcoming Revelation commentary, every title also available as an audiobook. Plus all his documentaries, Siege, Sabotage, and Brainwashed America, with Part 3 coming soon. Vault members can also stream the 2026 Worldview Weekend Conference, plus presentations from past Ozarks conferences. And coming soon, our new Bible and Worldview software, answering your questions from a trusted quarantine database of sound teachers and scholars. Join today at worldviewtube.com/vault. Plans start at just $7.99 a month.
All right, guys, welcome back from the break. Thanks for being with us again tonight. Joining me again in studio is JB Hixson, notbyworks.org. You are very popular with Dolly. Dolly keeps jumping up and saying hello to you. You're very, very popular with Dolly. She's a good judge of character. Some people she's afraid of, but she's not afraid of you and your wife.
No, we love Dolly. We love dogs. We have a 10-year-old lab, Juno.
Probably smells Juno on your clothes, so she knows you're a dog person. So it's a good thing you are, because you now got yellow dog hair all over that nice dark suit.
I
so
know.
There you go. But that's all right. We love dogs. All right, and folks, let's talk a little bit more. There's an article, and on radio and TV today, we talked about food shortages at 1 o'clock Central. And man, the stories went through about Great Britain, and their farmers over there are saying, we can't afford to put the crops in. Again, I think they're going to use food to control people, population control, just like Kissinger talked about in his famous paper in the 70s.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, it's all about control. Remember, it started in the heavenlies. We read about this in Isaiah 14 with Satan wanting control. King David wrote about it under the inspiration of the Spirit in Psalm 2, that the kings of the earth and the rulers of the world want to break off the cords of God's control. So they have control issues. They want full spectrum planetary control. And so they're trying to control every aspect of daily life. And especially the food. And so this is where it's headed,
Let's talk about the invasion. Here's an article you found today on Fox News. It's entitled, Muslim Brotherhood Linked Networks Embedded Across Canadian Institutions, New Report Alleges. It's Fox News. A new report is warning that networks aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood have become deeply embedded in Canada, raising concern that Islamist influence taking root north of the border could pose a broader threat to the U.S. and Western democracies. I'm thinking, why are you reporting on Canada when we've been invaded here? They're building mosques, everywhere. You can't swing a dead pig without hitting a mosque. And so you guys, I don't have a problem reporting on Canada, but we're worried about Canada?
Yeah,
we have been invaded.
I think they're looking on the wrong side of the border. I think the producers sent their reporters for Fox News up to the border to check on the Muslim invasion, and they got on the wrong side somehow. They misunderstood the marching orders. But what's really funny is talk about an upside down world. I saw this just this past Sunday in my prophecy update. But at a time when most conservative Christians are abandoning Israel, how wild is it that you've got this Muslim, Loy al-Sharif, August 19th, wrote an article. He's a practicing Muslim, and he wrote an article talking about how the Dead Sea Scrolls validate that Israel has a right to the land. He wouldn't talk about the Bible, but he just says from a historical document perspective, the Dead Sea Scrolls, they pretty much lay it out there. This is Israel's land. They belong on the land. That's coming from a Muslim. And he acknowledges that in the article, saying, look, I know that, it's kind of not supposed to be my view, but this is my view. And yet many so-called Bible-believing Christians cannot recognize Israel's right to the land.
And then you're bringing up the anti-Semitism. So let's combine that when we talk about America and our future. You have Islam rising, and we know what they think about the Christians and the Jews. And we have, even in America, many people converting to Islam. We had that white woman who's converted to Islam that was arrested, I guess, threatening a Capitol building in New York.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A white woman. So, again, you have Americans converting to Islam. Islam's hatred of Christians, hatred of the Jews, hatred of what they call the people of the book. Now you have anti-Semitism rising in America. So you have that hatred coming from Americans against the Jews. There's a hatred of the Christian Zionists who understand what God's long-term plan is for the redeemed of Israel. And then you talk about these nations moving against Israel. Well, if these nations move against Israel, what are those people going to do here in America? If the Islamists have such a dominant footprint in the country, you could quickly see where America is not involved. America does nothing. America's turned on Israel. And again, the Bible says all the nations of the world eventually turn against Israel. All means all, right? So you can see that President Trump, for the things we're frustrated about with him, he may be the last pro-Israel president we ever have. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think we've already had the last pro-Israel president, because I'm not so sure he's pro-Israel anymore. He certainly was, and hopefully still is, but some of the actions that he's taking show otherwise. And we talked about earlier how this Mecca agreement, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and now Iran, and Trump's out there cheering it, acting like this is the greatest thing in the world. Well, when you cheer Israel's enemies aligning themselves together in a military pact, I'm not so sure that's being a friend of Israel.
And when you are dividing the Gaza, and when you're telling them what they can and cannot do with Judea and Samaria, and isn't it interesting, while he's doing that, America's now being divided, right? You divide my land, I'm going to divide your land, right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean,
as America has done unto Israel, kind of thing. By John Tornin, I think, wrote the book.
Yeah, I mean, this is nothing happens by accident. They love to do trial runs, and they love to kind of see how things play in one part of the world and then tweak them and roll them out somewhere else. But yeah, we're seeing, it's a sad day. I said this, I think, previously a few weeks ago on your show. I just never thought I'd live to see the day when the U.S. would come out so adamantly and blatantly, I guess is the word, against Israel. Even though we've certainly had a bunch of presidents and leaders that were not, unashamedly pro-Israel, it's still to formally come out and, reject Israel the way we've done on certain issues in recent weeks is just stunning to me. And I think it's the beginning of the end. I hate to be pessimistic.
Let's go back to the Antichrist. We can maybe show that 3-book set.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Antichrist. You have Peter Thiel, who basically made, I think, J.D. Vance who he is. He's obsessed with the Antichrist, apparently, running around giving private speeches for a 4-part series on the Antichrist, saying that we have to have AI to stop the Antichrist. I said earlier this week, isn't that interesting? We have to have AI to stop the Antichrist, but the AI is what's going to enable the Antichrist.
100%.
So again, talk about your Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah, for sure. And my latest book, which really expands on that 3-volume trilogy, is Fade to Black. And I get into more detail there about the image of the beast and what I believe is going to happen. And by the way, folks can go to fadetoblackbook.com for that. But what I believe is going to happen is this image of the beast that Revelation talks about in 5 or 6 different places is going to be a tool of the Antichrist and false prophet that sort of the leader and the vice president, vice president kind of a thing, chief officer, second in command. They're going to rule the world during the beast system, and they're going to roll out these embodied AIs, images of the beast, as control mechanism, and they're going to be tied into a centralized data center. That's why we're seeing this massive rollouts of data centers, which is not new, but it's increased, and it's also now, because of AI, we can access the data in the bit buckets much more efficiently, faster, and in real time. So, Satan wants full spectrum planetary control. He'll never have omniscience or omnipotence or omnipresence, but he thinks he can create a workaround using technology, and I think that's what we're seeing with AI. So AI has really changed the game. I mean, there were ways he could do it. He could have standing armies, he could have spies, he could have other things, but to cover every inch of the globe takes satellites and technology and data centers and AI. And folks, we're there. I mean,
and what are we seeing with the flock cameras, right?
Yeah, and the flock cameras. I mean, that thing is just a huge issue. I mean, I had to laugh. The CEO, I think, testified recently or gave an interview, and he was basically saying, well, yeah, we value privacy, but we also need security. And, if folks would just stop being so upset and focus more on compromise. And I remember thinking, compromise? What are you talking about? I mean, this is reminds me of here's the, I'll throw this up there. This is the article. This is from August 22nd. Flock CEO safety calls for national compromise amid camera sabotage. And the first thing that popped into my mind, Brennan, and I know you'll appreciate this, was the famous Ben Franklin quote, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. We don't compromise on our constitutional rights to privacy and freedom and all that.
And you just wait for a massive terrorist attack like our own October 7th style attack in America, and the American people will surrender this. They will say, okay, we need those.
No doubt.
Because they're going to come out and say, well, if we'd had these cameras where we should have had them, the AI, the algorithms could have picked up on the patterns of these guys and what they were doing, and they're traveling and going to this store and that store. And, it could have put it together. The supercomputers could have predicted this for us in advance, which now we're in a pre-crime situation like, what was that?
Minority Report.
Report.
Yeah, so this is the quote that we've talked about a couple of times in the past from Kissinger, talking about the very thing that you're saying. When there's some kind of major crisis, major threat, major terrorist attack or something, Kissinger said, when presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by the world government. I mean, that's what their plan is, right there.
I think we have a clip from the Flock guy, right, Logan? Now let's play that, please.
Value their privacy. But what we're talking about is safety as well. And so I think when people talk about just one of these, privacy or safety, they're prioritizing the wrong thing. And what we have to prioritize as a country is compromise. How do we have our safety? And how do we balance privacy? And so when I think about legislation that calls for an outright ban, that's like banning vehicles. That would never have made sense. Instead, what we did is we introduced laws against drunk driving. We introduced laws around seatbelts, laws around airbags. I value my privacy, my family.
Okay, still hold right there. Go back to that guy. Why do all these little tech guys, why are these guys all such nerdy looking guys?
Yeah,
I mean, Zuckerberg and this dude. Why are all these guys look so nerdy like they're, they're just nerds.
And multimillionaires.
Revenge of the nerds.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds so great. It's obviously someone fed him these talking points. We just need compromise. Yes, we want you to be safe and secure, but we got to catch the bad guys. I want to say, well, look, let's compromise. Why don't you give some of your millions of dollars to feed the poor and see how quickly he wants to compromise.
Comparing to a car, how dumb is that?
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, there is a line that we just can't cross. You said it earlier, talking about standing on principle. Hopefully, you and I and others like us will stand on principle and not compromise when it comes to that. But
the American people are tearing these things up, and I'm not encouring anyone to do that, destroy private property. But the American people are speaking up and speaking out. What will be what turns it? Is McGregor Burns, James McGregor Burns. He wrote a book called The Power to Lead. He was a globalist, wrote it in 1984. He said, the founding fathers have been too smart for us, too shrewd for us. Frail bridges and tinkering will not get the job done. I don't think the American people will go where we want them to go, except under a stupendous national and economic crisis. This is what he said.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah. So this is what they're going to do.
Yeah. And, a lot of people that are catching this wave of destroying the cameras, which, by the way, I think some of that is sort of a COINTELPRO operation, kind of like J6, where you have government agents sort of provocateuring it. But some of it's real. A lot of it's real. People are fed up, but they're not doing it necessarily for the right reason. A lot of them are just, they're mad about getting speeding tickets and red light tickets and so forth. But, they're hiding those things, too. I don't know if you saw this report, but some fella found a flock camera kind of retrofitted to one of those radar screens that you see that show your speed, that they pop up around streets to just encourage people to slow down. They're just these little solar operated screens that show how fast you're going. Well, he looked at it a little closer and saw that it was actually a flock camera in there. So they're tracking and gathering data wherever they can.
And data, now they got these glasses that people are wearing. And so if someone's wearing these glasses and they come up and have a conversation with you, what you don't know is they're actually recording everything they're interacting with you right now.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Oh yeah, no, that's it. And they're tracking it. Trying to think where I saw that article just recently. Where here it is. So yeah, I mean. your phone may be giving a roadside sensor clues about where you go and which devices regularly travel alongside you. So this is in partnership with Flock. Your car passes a license plate reader, which records the plate along with the same location. Meanwhile, another sensor detects wireless signals coming from devices traveling nearby. So it could be a smartwatch, a wireless headphone, electronics built into the car, and those signals tend to move together. So they're tracking wherever your license plate is tagged, what other devices is there, which means what other people are there, and then they can use that. If you go off script, if you decide to take a different route, that sets off a flag. So it's a really sophisticated system. It's not omniscience the way God is, but that's what they're trying to accomplish.
And I don't know where you live, if you have police officers in your community where they will sit in a squad car when you come into town. Do they do that?
Oh,
in your
yeah,
town?
for sure. Yeah, speed traps, yeah.
Well, no, this isn't a speed trap. They're just sitting there. So when you come into town, like when you come into our town or the next town, they have cops at every entrance of our community, okay? And the cops are sitting there in squad cars. So there's, several roads, obviously, that come into our area. So they'll have a cop over here, and now you've just crossed into our community, our town. Cop over here, because you've just crossed from Germantown into Collierville. And they have them sitting there in the middle of the lanes. And initially, I think that was to let anybody know, we're here, we're watching, don't try anything.
Yeah, and slow down, yeah.
But it's for us, it's more the crime. It's the signal to the folks coming out of bad parts of Memphis, the hood, to rob. And they're coming in, mostly a lot of them in stolen cars, okay? Because then they can't be identified. And it's their way of saying, we are here, we're watching. But now as the technology has changed, I don't think they're there sending that message anymore. Now I think those cars, and I know one of the guys that developed the technology here in the Mid-South, those cars, those cop cars have the ability to see that license plate coming in. Now here in Tennessee, we don't have to have license plates on the front of our car, but we do have to have them on the back of the car. Some states you gotta have them front and back. I'm really shocked they haven't changed that law here yet. But those cars obviously are probably rigged where they can catch the car after it goes by them with a camera on the back. But the point I'm making is I'm pretty sure a lot of these squad cars are positioned in the middle of the lane with both. Because
Data
they're
harvesting.
scanning those cars, and I say to my wife, they know who we are. We just went by them. We're going this way. He's sitting there. He zagged our car tag. He knows exactly who we are.
Yeah, it's all data harvesting. And look, I don't have to tell you or your audience, there's a lot of great men and women that serve with a badge and protect us and keep us safe and do the things they're supposed to do. But we have come a long way from Mayberry. Remember back in the day when you saw the police deputy or sheriff coming down, you'd stop, he'd roll down his window, you'd say hi, you knew him, it was a good feeling. When's the last time you had a good feeling when you saw a police car? I mean, we're all conditioned now, even though we're not doing anything wrong, you see a cop car, all of a sudden your blood pressure goes a little up.
Well, I think
it shouldn't be
part of
that
that's
way.
because they have lowered the standards to be a police officer. They force the good guys out. They don't pay them well enough. And now we have people with the body cameras watching them do the dumbest stuff. I mean, once you get into the algorithm of a couple of these cops behaving badly with body cameras, you're like, you keep getting them thrown at you, and you're like, why would that guy do that, right? We just saw a guy that was sentenced because he shot a lady in the face when she called about something in her apartment, and they show up, and she went over to get some hot tea off the stove, and he told her to put that down. He's like, what are you afraid I'm going to throw it on you? And we played the video. And she, I guess was being sarcastic, really? Because she'd been sitting on the couch talking to, and she went over to move her hot tea off the pot. And the guy ends up shooting her in the face and killing her. He got sentenced to prison, and he just died from cancer. I think it was prostate cancer or something. He just died. But that's one of many, and you watch that video, you're like, she was so far away from you. Okay, it's boiling hot water, but she's so far away from you. Why did you go to that level, right? And apparently, the jury and the courts thought, that was not. So the point I'm making is the reason people become uneasy about cops now is because I don't think we're hiring the best and the brightest and the best trained anymore. I think that's by design, to break down the institutions of this country.
Right.
The long march through the institutions. So you don't respect the military. You don't respect the police, right? And I want to respect the military and I want to respect the police. But the problem is they've now weaponized and turned our police into basically semi-military.
Oh.
They're not hiring the right people. They have police arresting people for preaching the gospel on the street. They have police in the UK showing up at people's house and arresting them for very benign First Amendment, what we would say in America is the First Amendment comments about Islam or Palestine or Palestinians, and they're arresting them. So we're now even causing conservative. It used to be the liberals that had nothing to say good about the cops or the police, and we defended them because we understood the purpose of government, reward the righteous, punish the wicked. But now so many of our police departments run by so many woke people, and particularly in more liberal states, the police have become so woke that they have just become the Gestapo for the woke politicians.
Yeah, look, I mean, it takes a high school diploma and in most jurisdictions, 8 months of training to become a police officer. It takes, for example, 7 or 8 years to become a certified librarian. You know, so I mean, what does that tell you about what we're prioritizing? By the way, this Friday, my son Morgan and I, we always do a Crossfire Friday every Friday. It's a standing show. I think folks can get it at notbyworks.org or every social media channel. But we're doing one on Back the Blue, this very issue about trying to find that balance between being thankful and appreciative of those officers that are doing their job and keeping us safe, and yet the epidemic of problems of rogue cops that are just, they're bullies. What happens is they're bullies in high school, right? They are just bullies. They can't really do much with their life. So they go for 8 months, get a badge and a gun, and then it carries over. And then that's a generalization. And again, we want to be clear. We love and are thankful for those people that are doing what God's word says they're doing, protecting, punishing bad and blessing good. But unfortunately, and I think you're right, Brandon, it's not by accident. There's a big problem out there of rogue cops that are giving the rest of them a bad name.
I had a guy, when I was talking like this on air, I had a gentleman who emailed me. Maybe I can find it. I don't know if I'll be able to find it in time, but I had a gentleman that emailed me. He's retired. If I remember correctly now, he's retired. And he wanted to validate what I was saying when we were having this kind of conversation. And he wanted to validate his personal experience in dealing with these kind of candidates that are being cranked out. He was, I'll find it while you're talking, but
yeah, I mean,
he was just like, you are so spot on. And I want to affirm what you are saying from my years of experience.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to be smart. Look, when you get pulled over for speeding or whatever, don't bow up to them, because either A, they're already one of these, bullies that's just looking for a fight, so it's just going to make things worse, or they're a good-hearted, genuine, police officer trying to protect the citizenry, and they deserve your respect. So give them respect.
I found out that you do too. When you show them respect, you get respect back.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And if they are the kind that are looking to bully you or be power, you know what? Give it to them.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. How are you today, sir? Yes, sir.
Yes.
Give them what they're looking for.
Yep.
Be respectful. And if you sense they're, in this job because they like the power, then just become a little more submissive to them.
Yeah.
And be done with it and go on your way.
Absolutely.
You agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. Because
Logan, can you look at my email real quick to see if you can find that email from that gentleman? He emailed me probably a month ago, and I meant to read it on the air. And he was just writing in to say, you are so right on, and I've dealt with it, and I want to affirm and back up what you're saying as someone who comes out of the police field. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, we did the same thing back in the day when the TSA was rolled out after 9/11. Hated it, didn't like it, always opted out of the DNA altering, naked body scanners. And at first it was like I would just be snide and sarcastic and try to pick a fight with them. But I learned very quickly that doesn't go with them. They just take longer. They pull you aside for special screening. So you just be respectful, go through. You got to be smart. There's a time to fight, and then there's a time to stand up. Believe me, if the Lord tarries, we're all going to have serious opportunities to stand up. For now, just, do yourself a favor, be respectful, and move on. It'll end better.
It sure will. Well, maybe Logan will find that email from that former police officer. He was about training, and he was just validating the poor candidates that they're receiving, that they're getting a lot of poor candidates, and he was validating as someone who'd been in training and training police officers, long career. And he was just saying, you are so right on about these poor candidates that we're getting. If you find it, let me know, and I'll read it because it was really good.
Yeah, and Brandon, the other thing is for all the great officers that are serving, men and women, they're being trained to be stoic and kind of harsh and stern, because there are a lot of bad guys out there that are looking for trouble. And so they're being trained by their managers and so forth.
Well, they will kill you. The criminals will kill
absolutely.
you. And they're more violent than ever before. And we see that in the body cam footage where good, decent police officers are trying to just do their job. And next thing you know, the guy's shooting at them.
Yeah.
And it was just a routine traffic stop.
Yeah. And there's so much lawsuits out there and stuff. So, I get it. You can't, even if you're one of the good guys, you can't, as an officer, walk up to the car and say, hey, how you doing? Where you headed? Oh, nice.
No.
Oh, I went to that school that's on your bumper sticker. They can't even engage you in real, genuine conversation because they're afraid that they'll be taken advantage of, or they'll be sued, or they're on their body cam and their manager, their boss, their sergeant's going to say, hey, you can't talk like that. You just need a license and registration. So it's just sad the way things have devolved.
I want to go back to Revelation chapter 13 and get your thoughts on what you believe this passage means. In Revelation chapter 13, we have the image being set up in the temple. And then it says, verse 15, he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast. That word breath can mean spirit, like in Acts 16 and 19 for a demonic spirit. That the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small, great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark of the right hand, and that no one could buy or sell unless they have the mark. But notice what it says there, that in one of these, he encourages people. He performs, verse 13, performs great signs so that even makes fire come down from heaven. Okay, here we go. Verse 14. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs, which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image of the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. So there's not just an image in the temple.
Oh, no.
They're encouraging people, the Antichrist, or I should say the false prophet, who's doing what he does in front of the Antichrist, which means with his approval. He's encouraging people to set up their own image of the beast.
Oh, yeah.
And what do you think that means in a day and age of technology and computers and AI?
Yeah, so, first of all, that's definitely the false prophet working under the direction of the Antichrist, who himself is working under the direction of Satan, so they're all part of that unholy trinity. I've always taken that, not that he's encouraging the general public to go out and make a bunch of images, but that he's directing a manufacturing staff to go out and create these images of the beast, which, as I said, are going to be deployed.
Disseminated.
Yeah, disseminated. The interesting verse that you touched on right at the first there on verse 15 is that the false prophet was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast. That harkens all the way back to Genesis 2, God breathing into mankind the breath of life. That is Satan's ultimate goal. He wants to be able to create life. That's the transhumanist aspect of the whole Luciferian agenda. They want to create life. God spoke the world into existence ex nihilo. He is the eternal creator of the universe. Satan will never be able to do that. But I think this is the shining moment where through technology and the biodigital convergence, they're going to have all of these millions of embodied AIs. I mean, look, they're having robotic Olympics now and robotic races. Some robot in China just beat Usain Bolt's record for the 100-meter. And so they're going to have millions of these, and the false prophet's going to breathe into them the breath of life, thinking in that moment they have kind of created the singularity. That's their goal.
So let me read this. I did find it before we break here. His name is Alan. I won't say more than that. This was on July 18th. He said, Brandon, I almost forgot to send you my thoughts on what you and Dr. Woods were discussing related to the purposeful changing of law enforcement. You are both 100% correct that the profession has been and is being transformed. For 28 years, I served in a major Midwestern police department. A major portion of my career was spent training officers, from recruits to in-service training to tactical officers and specialized units. Over the years, I saw a shift in the recruits coming into the profession. It was a shift away from hiring people who were determined, self-motivated, cunning, ready to fight crime and put criminals to jail, to a affable, self-centered, lackadaisical people looking to perform the bare minimum. It's not all the new recruits, but the percentage has been increasing. Along with the increasing numbers of these types of officers, we had definite change in the mission focus of police executives. The shift was from fighting crime and enforcing the law to just being visible and reactionary. Officers who were dedicated crime fighters were moved around, and partnerships split up to squash aggressive crime fighting. They wanted to squash the crime fighting. The result was just as both of you said, officers retired, quit the profession, or just found a place to ride out their remaining time to retirement. Many of the new officers coming into the profession see it as something they'll try out and leave if it doesn't suit their expectations. Also, many newer officers bring questionable lifestyles and foundational beliefs. This compromise of character, as you both stated, will be used in the coming world system. I retired from my agency and am employed by another entity training police. I still see an increasing number of candidates that are questionable. This is part of the plan for our world to enter its final phase. However, I'm doing my part to hold the line and try to preserve a system of law and order. I could really go on with this topic and give specific examples, but I wanted you both to know how correct you are. May God bless both you and your work. Closing comment?
Yeah, I tell you what, that's firsthand anecdotal evidence right there. But look, we know who wins in the end. If you're watching this and it's kind of got you a little bit anxious hearing all that's unfolding, make sure you know the Lord Jesus as your Savior. Place your faith in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who died and rose again for our sins. And if you already know the Lord, stay rooted in the Word of God. Exciting days are coming. Yeah, it's fading to black, but it's always darkest right before dawn.
And we've been talking about Revelation, and there it is, the 3-volume set, volume 1, 2, and 3 on Revelation. It's at the printer now, hardcover, gold printing on the spine and front. It's a layman's commentary. It's my commentary on Revelation, teaching it for a year and a half, then putting it into those 3 books. And it's available for you, folks. We have a lower third for it, guys. Worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com to do a pre-order. Again, if you want to get it in time for the holidays, you should do that, because once they sell out, it'll take 6 weeks to get them back in, and they are really selling well. So thank you for your support, and I'm glad you are interested in that. Worldviewstore.com. JB Hixson, notbyworks.org. JB, thanks for being with us. Great to have you in studio. Hope you'll come back again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Wonderful place. Yep.
All right, guys, that's our broadcast for tonight. What a full program. Again, you appreciate what we're doing. We need your support. Worldviewfoundation.com. Roll the music. Let's call it a night. Worldviewfoundation.com. Worldviewfoundation.com. Okay? Got some more great guests planned for the week. So tweet, text, email, Facebook, Getter, Truth Social. Tell all your family and friends about Worldview Tube. Not only the stream that goes out, but then after the program goes off by the next morning, we're putting them all up online for you to watch again, absolutely free of charge, as a broadcast ministry of our organization. And one way you can support us, worldviewfoundation.com. May God save America. Take care.
Faith, spiritual values, moral issues, government, economy, education, work, responsibility. What we think about these depends on our worldview. Now, VCY America presents Worldview Radio with Brannon House.
And welcome to the broadcast. Glad you are with us. We are joined in studio by JB Hixson. JB Hixson was in the area. I found out. I said, whoa, why don't you come on over? A couple hours out of your way, I know, but why don't you come on over and join us? And I'm so glad he did. He's here. JB, welcome. We're going to have you on TV tonight. We have a lot to talk about. Thanks for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Looking forward to it.
I want to talk about so much today, but I want to start out with, and I'm looking for some PowerPoint. Logan, if you wouldn't mind grabbing those images that we talked about last night, Ruskin, his tomb, the book, the American British Anglo Empire by Carol Quigley. Mm-hmm. We have so much to talk about. This is in my book, The Coming Religious Reich from 2016. And it all matters, folks. This is really, really fascinating. Very fascinating what I'm about to play for you guys. And again, I played this last night, but it bears playing for the TV audience because this is such big news. When you can just hand it to me, guys. Thank you so